Order at 12:08 on a Wednesday. And moment of reflection and pledge of allegiance led by Trustee Pearson. Please stand. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And now adoption of the, roll call, just kidding. Roll call, Sam?
Trustee Soilu?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy? Trustee Pearson?
Here.
Trustee McElroy?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Here.
Trustee Crane?
Here.
Trustee Weigand? Here. Dr. Brown?
Here.
Great. Now, adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Green and Pearson. Roll call vote. Sam?
Trustee Soilu?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy? Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson? Yes. Trustee McElroy?
Yes.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand? Yes.
Great. And community input on special agenda items only. Trustee Pearson, can you read the floor? We have one.
This is an opportunity for the public to address the board regarding items on the special meeting agenda only. Comments on special meeting agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per comment, up to 20 minutes per topic. The speaker may not relinquish his or her time to another person.
Great. So for this, we have one comment from Cole Christians.
Hi. Where would you like
Right
to be?
over
Right
here.
here?
Right over here.
Is it a microphone? So I have the same tendencies as Mr. Smith here. I like a microphone. So my name's Cole Crecilius. I'm a dad of 2 boys at College Park Elementary. I saw this meeting come up, and I was, saw that the strategic planning session that we had a few weeks ago was on here, and I thought I would come as a parent and just share my perspective. First and foremost, I want to thank so much the district and everybody involved for making it happen. I know it was a major feat to get everybody in that room. I'm sorry you all weren't able to be there. I know there are reasons for that happening. But it was a very special time with so many incredible stakeholders across every school. Everyone, you could ask anyone, everyone would say their favorite part was having the students there and getting to hear from actual high school students. Absolutely. And so not only making that effort to have that happen, but the thing that I was most proud of in being a part of that whole journey was the transparency that the staff and the district put out there, and the data that you all maybe have reviewed or will get to review, and just saying good, bad, or otherwise, this is where we're at. This is where test scores are. This is where it's at by zone. This is where it's at by, socioeconomically disadvantaged, English language learners. It put all of that into really great perspective. And for me, it helped answer a few things and provide some objectivity to some issues that have been really near and dear to our heart. For us at College Park Elementary, we see a lot of families kind of come in and leave, or not even try us out for the first time. One quick story to share is that my son, who's a 4th grader, was talking to a 5th grader that had just left College Park, and that student, when asked by my son, "Hey, why did you do that?" He goes, "Well, I'm going to another school in the district to get a better education." And that is heartbreaking. And it's unfortunately a prevailing belief amongst parents, because I can only speak for parents, but I know it's not something that any one of us believe in this room. And it's something that I think this data now that's out there is something that we really have to look at. And I would really highly encourage you all to look at the school transfer data. College Park, for example, 39% of students who are zoned for that school do not transfer out to different schools. But that's not just College Park. It's a zone issue for Estancia and Costa Mesa. The demographics of Costa Mesa are changing, and I think that our strategic vision has to think about that moving forward. So, thank you.
Perfect timing. Yeah.
Not my first rodeo.
All right, so now we'll move into item 6, the strategic visioning and planning board update. So we'll turn it over to our consultant, Sandy, who has been working with staff on this.
All right, good morning. I keep saying morning, it's afternoon. I was sick all last week, so I feel like I've lost a few days. Glad to be with you all today, and it was such an honor and a pleasure to get to be with your community for those couple of days last month. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to take you through the overview, very quick review kind of the process and what we've done just to anchor you to that. And then a little bit about the experience. And then we've got data that we've collected. And the goal today is really for the board to start to grapple with the data that we've collected from the folks that were there and the next steps and really get your input because as you know, you are the body that sets direction for the district. And so we're going to really talk a little bit about your role in this process. Carolyn sends her regrets. She would be here if she could. She has been up working in Northern California until the wee hours. And so she is online and listening, and we're going to invite her in just a little bit. We know the Zoom piece and having her virtually is a little challenging. I wish she could be here dynamically because she's lived this process and been a board member. But she will be able to ring in, and she's listening to everything, so at the end we'll also invite her in to speak, but we don't want to distract the board with too much going on. So I'm going to jump in. Did you want to say anything, Wes, before I start? I know I shouldn't probably give you the mic before I get going.
No, I don't like the mic. Yeah, contrary to popular belief. No, I just want to thank the consultants for their hard work, taking all the data that we had in that space, all over the walls, all over the tables, and to take that and consolidate it for you, Herculean effort. Thank you, and to the community that supported this. Yeah. You know, we had, and you'll see a slide on this, but we invited 180 folks, and they told us, you know, you probably get 50% of those folks, had 160 show up. We heard from folks in the room, it was the most diverse constituent meeting they've seen in this district and the largest, right, at scale. I don't know, I've only been here 4 years. But I think it speaks to the intentionality around it. Even at the tables themselves, I would say, so as you look at this data, you might be thinking about who's in the room. We've shared a bit of that. Socorro Shields even took and hand-assigned every single table to make sure that it had diverse representation, right? So it wasn't one group at one table, et cetera. And so the intentionality, I think, paid off, and I think the results demonstrate that. So thank you to the community, thank you to the, our consultants and to the board for authorizing this work.
And this is a process, it's a journey, and so we're going to talk about that today and get the board's input and direction as we move to the next phase. And I'll just take you quickly through the overview. We're going to talk in a minute about who's in the room, what we were looking to get out of it, give you a little snapshot of the 2 days. And then the big part of our time together today is really for you to take a look at the data that we collected around this idea of commitments, portrait of a graduate, and then strategic visioning initiatives, and to give us some input and feedback. This is not the totality of the data. We have a lot more data. Our job is to get into the weeds and to really look for themes across the different areas to bubble up things. But what you're seeing here is really the top pieces that came out of all the data that we did collect around these areas. But we have other stuff that we will go through as we work on this process. So we were with folks for a whole day and a half day, November 12th and 13th at Vanguard University. Wonderful facility, that was just fabulous. And as we already said, we had 123 participants from across the district. Administration, classified, certificated, parents, students, community leaders. I'm not sure if that was our accurate number. And I was going to ask Wes if he wouldn't mind just bringing in a little bit about, the folks that were in the space, because I'm an outside observer, so I know he was a little bit more intimately involved. One thing I will say before you hear a little bit more about that is I always gauge how well that heterogeneous grouping is by the kind of conversation that I hear. And so Carolyn and I pushed in, and we also had Lizette with us, and we were at every table throughout the day. And the level of conversation, and I know Cole can probably agree, was at a high level at every table. It was really an amazing thing to see. And so I really commend you, and to Wes's point, sometimes you'll set one of these up, people send out a lot of invitations, really get assurances that folks are gonna be in the room, and then they're not there. And that was not the case for yours. The tables were full, the conversations were dynamic. Did you wanna add anything to?
Just clarifying for any community members that weren't aware, didn't know, or concerned that it was predominantly a staff voice. Intentionally, that wasn't so. So as we invited parents in, we looked at parental representation from every single zone, from every site, but then also strategically bringing in folks from like CAC and DLAC to speak to those realities. And then leaned in even more to community with our community leaders. So we looked at folks like realtors, business owners, faith-based leaders in our community to come and speak to those different dynamics. And then we allowed the trustees even to say, here's someone I would recommend because in my community, they really know, boots on the ground, what's going on. So we combined all those folks together with the parents, with the students, with certificated, classified. And last night we had the leader of our classified unit, speaking to this and expressing gratitude for being invited into the room. We had Spanish-speaking parents there, we had Russian-speaking parents there, and really we're intentional too about lifting up that voice, because we know some of the folks in the room aren't always as confident as Cole and I with the microphone, and so they might sit back a little bit. We wouldn't let them, we kind of push their voice forward. So again, that's the representation, intentionally so, designed in the room to maximize the opportunity.
All right. So, as we've said with you all, and I'll just put it up there for context, the whole goal is really to have unified direction. Yes, you have the LCAP, and a couple 100-page document. It's not inspiring. It's not something that you can really wrap your hands around. So the goal with this is typically not off base from what you have there, but what it does is it elevates other kinds of themes, direction, and ideas that may not be present in sort of the tactics that we put in our LCAP. But Patrick Lencioni, who's a well-known organizational researcher and strategist, says that if you could get everyone in any organization pulling in the same direction, you could dominate any industry and any market against any competition at any time. We're not business. We're not that kind of an organization. But the reality is we don't have all the oars in the water at the same time, pulling that whole organization in the direction that we want. And I always use this slide because this is really about high-performance teaming, but it makes the point that the results are at the top, and what everybody wants is just to go to results. Accountability, let's hold people accountable, let's get things done. The reality is it's a process, and you have to have all those components in place in order to meet those goals. This is just a quick little slide to show you some of what was happening in the room. When I was a teacher, I used to tell my students that thinking is a messy business, and I think this was evident during that day. We were doing a lot of thinking, a lot of storming. Up on the top left picture, you see our student panel. They did a fabulous job, and we always really try to elevate student voice in this because we always talk about them as our end users. How are we meeting your needs? Are we doing what you want us to do as you think about your future? So a lot of thinking, a lot of collection. We really should invest in those large Post-it. So the board's role in this is unique, and you are the body that sets direction for the district. And you will see as you go through the data, everybody's coming in with their lived experience. I've done several of these now, and every board says, we need more input. Did we get enough? We need more. And you can always slice and dice that, and we'll hear from you today about, the direction on that. But the reality is, I think when you look at the data, we had a great cross-section in that room of people representing a variety of voices, and all voices were valued and elevated, and you're going to see that in the data. Your job is to think about holistically the organization, where you're trying to take it, and which of these.
Let you just do it.
So, okay.
Yeah. I'll let her know.
Okay. And make sure that what bubbles up here and the direction that we go on and with this vision really aligns with your vision, your collective vision. And then ultimately, the initiatives that are picked, if everything's important, nothing's important. So how do you bubble up those, if we could do nothing else as we steer this district in the direction we want, what are those things that we want to accomplish? And so I'd ask you to think about these questions. What outcomes matter most for your students over the next 5 years? Because that's really the lifespan. And again, this is something we're going to continue to work on. We're not launching in January, so we've got some some pathway to lay to get to that place. How do you define success for your community? If you were doing, if you had a miracle wand and everything looked like you wanted it to look tomorrow, what's that look like? What's the success for your folks? And then are the initiatives balanced between forward-thinking, aspirational, and specific and tangible? When things are too lofty, it's overwhelming. If they're too weedy, it's not inspiring. So we're looking through that sort of sweet spot around what those initiatives look like. Your job then is really to determine what ideas and considerations might be missing from the input gathered so far. And what you're going to see when you go through the data is there's an idea over here. Maybe it really belongs over here. That's the kind of feedback we really need from you today, because as we've talked as a board, this is one of the things that keeps coming up. And then also, ultimately, as the fiduciaries, is how can resources be used to support the new vision. That will be happening now, but that should be in your mindset, right? You should not be creating a vision that no one can execute, no one can afford, can't happen. You should be setting that balance between inspirational, aspirational, and realistic. And it is not an easy task. Everybody wants everything all the time and yesterday. And so your goal is to think about what can really get you where you want to be for your students in the future. I think there's a Venn diagram. Wes and I were talking this through, and I actually have this in my head, but I put it on paper, because really any district's strategic elements are sort of in the middle of a Venn diagram. Part of that really is the knowledge from the field, the real world needs, the changing dynamics, future unknowns. There's a lot of stuff floating out there, but you have experts, you have your cabinet, you have your staff, who are your knowledge base for what is best practice, what really should and could be happening. And then you have the community lived experiences, the current realities that people are facing in the district, at the particular sites, at the district writ large, and then an understanding of the current context. And so in the middle there is where we should find those elements, things that really do line up with what's a best practice, where you need to be heading for your students, what can we plan for and what's an unknown, and then really that idea that you all know, you've been here, you went to school here, your kids went to school here, you have neighbors, and so all of that comes to play in this role. All right, so we're going to dig in. The first thing that I really want to have you think about is this notion of the commitment. We started off with this idea of a commitment because you do have this idea of all students are all our students, seen, heard, supported, and safe. And we had that up for the community to kind of respond to. And we spent some time unpacking with them. What does it mean to be seen? What does it mean to be heard? What does it mean to be supported? What does it mean to be safe? So from all the different aspects of your district, what do we think is a definition that we'd like applied to all of us in our community? The top most responded to answer was know by name. And we heard a lot about that. And that idea, and some districts have know by name and need, right? That idea that people see me on my campus and in my community, and they know me, they know my name. We were having a little sidebar conversation about the idea that we don't hold things in our brains the same way that we used to, right? And I think we are everybody's kind of distracted. And so this idea that kids, and this came up a lot with the students, like know who I am when I'm in a class. Follow up with action, that idea of follow through. Don't just put a great idea out there, but let's make sure things get done. And so that's an interesting, when you think about the notion that we were talking about, being seen, being heard, being supported, and being safe. This was something that resonated with the community. So much of what's going to happen now is what we had each team do was they brainstormed what they thought it was. Then they collected those, and you're going to get to go through this activity in a minute. We gave them spend-a-dots, or dots to spend, and they went around and rated the things that really resonated with them. Now keep in mind, they had tons of things to process and go through, and it's like these dots are worth thousands of dollars. People really think about where they're going to put them and what's really important. And I think it's important for you as the board to hear that was one that, half the room said that needs to be something bubbled up for the board. Follow up with action then. Again, I go back to the idea that this was in this context of how are we seen, safe, heard, and supported, that they want things to happen. They want things to happen. Student voice, equity of voice, the really highly prioritized one, acknowledgement, etc. So just give you a minute to take those in, and then you're gonna get them in a minute. We bubbled up the top ones for you to respond to, but I wanted you to see all of those. And my seed planting for you as we go forward, and you giving us some ideas about what you think is important, and then we're gonna have a dialogue as you give us direction for the next steps. What do you envision as important? Do you want a statement? Do you want definitions of seen, heard? Because that's really important on where we go in the next phase. So what are those things, and how would you want this to be impactful in the learning community in Newport-Mesa? Thoughts or comments before I go to the next slide? Okay. I know you're going to take in the data. We're going to give you time to do that and then come back and process with us. I just spent a little time grouping them just so the board could kind of see some of the themes that came up around this. So belonging and being known was a high priority around obviously seen, heard, safe, and supported. Trust, safety, and emotional support. And then relationships and intentional practices. The other three that I themed were student voice, agency, and feedback. Again, that student voice was a really the top vote getter. And then the follow-through notion of support and resources and making sure those are there for students. And then finally, pathways, options, and future readiness. Not as much interest here, but you're going to see that emerge in other parts of it.
Yeah. It's funny because we thought that was what this was.
But you're going to see that in the initiatives, because that bubbles up
all the time.
and it does. So remember I said you're going to see a lot of crossover, and so this was still, even in this notion of what do you want us to be committed to about seeing, this came up, but you're really going to see it as a high priority when we get to the initiatives.
I think one of the things that helps provide context is with the commitments we're talking about, those commitments we've expressed to the community, every student seen, heard, supported, safe. All our students are all our students. So they're responding to those commitments. And even then this came up.
And even then this came up.
And then when they talk about, okay, so what does that look like for like a portrait of a graduate? Then you see even more of those AI skills. In fact, that bubbles up to the top then. That's right.
Well, and I think for me, the observation is a lot of this is fundamental to who was being asked. Like the reason why we're having those as our current kind of district goals is because that was something that wasn't happening, right? So that's something that we're tangibly and very strategically working towards. There's notebooks, every staff person got one this year. As a reminder, it's something that we have been working on, and it's because we didn't have it in the past. And so I think some of these are, there are a lot of high school students that were in the room. This may not have been their experience in elementary school. It may not be their current experience. And I think particularly for some of our families, this has not been their experience. And so we have, similarly to the triangle, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if some of those basic pieces are missing, if there's not trust, if a student comes on campus or a family comes on campus and they don't feel emotionally safe, if they don't feel personal connections or trust, they're not thinking about what does it look like when my child is 16 and is looking for the future. So I think these are fundamental, and these are areas that we have needed to work on and grow in. And so to me, it just reiterates, yes, we're making progress, but it's still a huge fundamental need.
Right. And I think as you guys are processing the data and responding to it and thinking about the direction, much of this will be stuff that you've started or are doing. And so your goal is really now to bubble it up, make it something that's an expectation across the district, right? Continue to name it and put it out there. So I think there are some things that you may say, okay, we're really not doing that well, but I would imagine almost everything that you're going to see, not everything, but I think most things are going to be things that you've talked about, you're touching on, you're working on explicitly. And to your point, that's why the diversity in that room and having students and community members and parents of young children and students who graduated helps you get that continuum. And to your point, still, these are the things that bubbled up. Okay. So in order to set the stage, we asked staff to provide sort of the data story. of the district, because you've got folks in there that only know their lived experience, and some of them it's narrow. Students haven't really, necessarily elevated up and thought about what's the whole district look like? What are the things that are successful? What are the challenges? So for each of these areas, your cabinet stood and really gave great presentations on the data around student achievement, really dissecting out what does it look like holistically, what does it look like by zones, what does it look like by grade spans. They did the same thing with student wellness and safety, community engagement, leadership development and employee success, and then fiscal and facility resources. So for each of those, we've got just again, aerial view, because you cannot, you guys, how much data there is out there. But really we wanted the whole room to be thinking, framing it around some of the data. Who's here? What are we trying to do? And then what are the challenges and what are the successes? What do we think is going well? And what are our acknowledged challenges within the data? And I think you have all of that in your binders in front of you. And so way too much for obviously, folks to really dig into, but it was referential. And the one thing I want to say is they did a great job of presenting. Folks had the data on their table. When we got to each of these initiative areas, which I'm going to show you in a minute, folks had it was like homework. They had their binders out, they were going through them, they had somebody scribing. Again, our facilitators did a great job. We had administrators that helped with that. And so they were scribing what the table was saying, and so they were really able to capture and use what was in their binder to make some of those determinations. So I'll just tell you what we did. We showed a little video. This is not the end-all be-all by any stretch of the imagination, but every year, Indeed does a little segment on the Today Show that captures what are the job skills people are looking for right now, whether you're straight out of high school or you are a college grad or you're looking for a new job. What is marketable? What is needed? And I think you can see from the heading there, human-centric skills. Talked about AI. You got to be able to be adaptable, move in that area, and you really have to be able to have conflict mitigation, be able to innovate, be able to think and speak. So it just gives a little framing for everybody in the room that's at a level that should be accessible for all the folks that are with us.
Can I say something about scribing real quick?
Yep.
Because I think we've all been in rooms where, you ask an administrator to facilitate and they take over the conversation. And so we did intentional training for the folks who are scribing, facilitating the tables, to say, you're there to take notes.
That's right.
Right? They're there to speak. And so we didn't even leave that to chance.
No,
we wanted the room, the people invited there to elevate their voices.
And I heard, walking around, facilitators would say things like, so what do you want me to write? Because they'd be having all these conversations. What do you want me to say? So, and it's not easy. And I also wanted to say, we did have one of our facilitators was Lizette Hernandez, who was a superintendent up north and is a Spanish speaker. And so she also worked through the room and was able to, on the spot, translate and answer questions. And I think that was value added. Oh, so let me go back. The portrait of a graduate, there are really three elements to the portrait of a graduate that exist, whoever's kind of doing them. It's academic, cognitive. What are those, thinking skills, academic skills? What are the interpersonal or personal skills? What are the qualities that you want students to take away when they get their diploma and cross that stage? And then interpersonally, what do they need to do to be successful? And you just heard from, this Indeed presentation, you saw that part of that is just the human-centric abilities to communicate. So they had a little resource in their binder, and then we asked folks to just start brainstorming at their tables. And then what I talked about earlier, we put those up on the wall. You saw some photos of that, and then people spent a dot. You could think of the three things, because they only get so many dots. There's no science to the dots, and people may have used more dots than we gave them. But the idea being that what are the three or so things that you really want on each of these areas? There are two things in each of these areas for people to have as they leave Newport-Mesa. Critical thinking, clearly important. Problem solving also. And then you can see literacy, resilience, creativity, analysis. So this is one of the areas where the board has to really think about the totality of your work, all the things that are presented to you, because some of these words may not be the words you as the board want as terminology, but you want the concept. So I want you to think about that as you look at these going forward. Personal, these were all in more competition. There's a little bit of overlap here and there. Integrity, though, was the highest. Confidence, adaptability, perseverance, self-awareness, and resilience. And so again, as the board thinking about you're handing out these diplomas, what are the personal qualities you really hope that Newport-Mesa plays a role in? And then finally, interpersonal. And what I thought was interesting.
I've got a question.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Were these terms fed to the group?
No.
Or they came up with
They
those
came up
terms?
with those, yeah.
Okay.
We did tell people they could use their phones, so I know folks were Googling and, looking up other things into AI, ChatGPT. What are important skills for a portrait graduate?
Building that critical thinking.
Right?
Oh, yes.
But what I think is interesting is it was the interpersonal skills that, people also really that resonated with them. So collaboration on top with conflict resolution, communication, respect, responsibility, empathy. And then there are a number of others that came underneath it, but without that, and you'll see some of those when you come around. So questions about that? And I'm going to tell you what you all are going to do. We're going to get you up and moving. And then finally, after the portrait of the graduate work that we engaged in, we asked them now to think about these big ideas, the initiatives. So given all we've talked about, the data that you've seen, what you've said you value, what the commitments are in Newport-Mesa, what you want your graduates to look like. Here's where you are, here's where you want to be. What should the board and the staff be doing in order to make that happen? And so this is a big lift, I will tell you, and they engaged, we probably could have spent a whole other day. They had a lot of ideas. And as you go through the initiatives, the one thing I want to say to the board is, you're going to see some of them are weedy because we don't give them any parameters. We really just let them, what comes to mind as you think about what are these areas you want the district to be focused on, given all that you've heard and talked about at your table areas. And so these are the ones that they bubbled up. And I just want to take a minute and kind of go through them and say a couple of things. As you're responding to these in a few minutes, when you get a chance to digest these a little bit, you may notice that there are things that are specific. Bring back home ec. Like that's a how, right? But you might say out of that, what we're hearing is, right, real life skills for adulting. Or what's that big bucket that you want the district to focus on? And then your staff's gonna come back with the action plan. What does that look like? How can we do that? But these are the original ideas from that community. Integrating life skills like personal finance and AI literacy, which did get bubbled up in the entire room so that students are prepared to function. We did have a parent who brought that up and said, especially initially, and I think that's the power of that room, you have all these different voices. We do pass the mic a lot, so they don't just hear the voice at their table, so we did a lot of sharing out. So this got bubbled up and then it created a lot of conversation at other tables as well. The idea of relevant life skills, though, is something I think you can see was really important, and there were a lot of things that came under that bucket. Expanding CTE pathways, so as we talked about earlier, here it is again as an initiative in terms of academics and really looking at a 7-12 curriculum on that. They talked about supporting students in an individualized way, and so not just students who may have an individual plan, but for really thinking about individual needs. And then early identification and intervention, reevaluating the definition of student achievement. So that's an interesting notion for you to think about. And then this was just a question, but I left it in there because I do think this was a conversation around our tables. It was about English learners, students with special needs, and students with disabilities, same issue. Belonging and safety was another bucket. So this first one is academics. This next one we've grouped kind of under belonging and safety. We have training for teachers on behavior support, prioritizing opportunities for connection in all classrooms. So again, you're seeing that notion that we talked about, making sure everybody's having that experience. Strong relationships, again, the same theme. So you're going to see overlap here. And so part of what we need to hear from you today is around the notion of language, verbiage, focus that really resonates with you as a board. Creating zone pride and this notion of zones and ensuring that zones have what they need and students are staying and really getting what they need in their zones came up quite a bit. Creating a climate and culture of social safety, and then ultimately, again, identity specializations for schools. So that idea that people want to be in their neighborhood community. high expectations and accountability. It's slightly different than the academics, and so here is really, thinking about the idea of how are you measuring it, how do you know, how are we allocating resources, so that idea that there's a high expectation system-wide and accountability for that system-wide, right, versus just in particular pockets. The sense of pride came up, the adopting additional standards for achievement, A through G in alignment, high quality institutions, and that may have been instruction, but we captured it as it was. Individualized expectations with individual and appropriate supports, habits. So again, you see what I'm saying about some of these things may be in 3 buckets, and so we may decide where do you want them and where can they best be represented. The idea of systems and resources, as a board, that's your big challenge, is how do you support the entire system, and then how do you allocate resources in a way that makes that happen. So this was a big idea that came up, and one size fits all, moving away from that and really looking at each of your schools. And again, remember I said you're either doing it, talking about it, or it's something that's represented. So none of these ideas will be new, but this is what the community in that space said they really, for them, that's what they feel, and they'd like to see it moving away from that. Life readiness, here it is again. Trust and empower educators and professionals to collaborate, communication system, and then developing systems to ensure effective allocation of needs-based resources. And then continuous improvement, really having meaningful learning opportunities for all students, multicultural awareness, surveying school-free space. Again, some of these are really how we, right? But the idea in their mind is there this systemness around how we're doing this work? Accessing innovative technology, connections to concepts, real world, and then again, IB programming, suggestion, this is a how, not a what. Hopefully as you're listening to this though, you're hearing, excuse me, under each of these 3, or these 5 areas, there's probably 3 key areas that can be combined, and so that's where the board really, we need to hear from you today. How do you see this when you think about the big ideas under each of these areas? What did that look like? So, as I shared earlier, so now I'm going to give you the assignment portion of the meeting, and so we'll give you about 15 to 20 minutes, we'll see how you're doing, but you do have dots in your binder, just as the participants did on that day. And people always ask me, why do I only have this number? There's no science to it. I've read no literature on how many dots you should have in these activities. If you want to get more from Rosie, feel free. But what we really want you to be able to do is to at least get one of your ideas on these posters so that we can see what you're thinking. I think we gave them 2 per poster. Was that the goal, Rosie? I think we did 2 per poster-ish, or 2 or 3. And so what you're going to do, as you think about the commitments, you're going to look at the list of words, you're going to say what best resonates with you and captures what you think are the commitments. But I also would like you to take a notepad with you, take something to write down, and I want you to really reflect as a board and think, what's missing? Is there something there that you're surprised, or something that you thought you would see that you're not seeing that you'd like us to consider? Because again, this is the input. We were really clear with our participants that day that the board ultimately is the body that revises, refines, and puts this in a way that makes sense for the entire community. And so if you have ideas how something can be captured in a different way, we want to hear from you. Same thing for this portrait of a graduate. They're not put in any particular order. I'm just going through, again, what you're going to do for each of them. You will note, on most of these that you'll look at, if you looked at any other districts, you're going to see sort of 2 personal, 2 interpersonal, 2 academic cognitive, kind of as a balance. And actually, it's kind of the way they bubbled up, so you'll think about that as you go through those. And every community is different. I think I've said in this room, every school district in the state of California is a thumbprint, right? We have swirls and whirls, and they're all different. And so if you look at every different district, you're going to see different nuances around the language and those skills that are most important. And the same thing now with strategic initiatives. And so the task for you, and you can see we have them with the headings, continuous improvement, academics, is to kind of make notes. So let's say you see CTE pathways throughout, and you know there's going to be some sort of initiative. You imagine that because that's clearly something the community's had input around. You're already working on it. Where do you want that to live? So if you have an idea, like I really think if we're gonna have something around CTE pathways and impactful secondary, I would like to see it under academics, or I would like to see it under, where do you want that to live? That helps us as we aggregate the data. And then I will bring you back and we will have a discussion and gather input. So let me give you about 15 minutes. I know that's not a long time. And remember, we'll
10, you would good.
10?
Probably 10 is good.
Okay.
It's a fast group, very
It's
opinionated.
okay, they probably already coming in with some ideas. So if you wouldn't mind, and the reason we are gonna have you do this, I will actually capture these so that I know kind of board's thinking, and it's easier to do than just having you verbally give us that input. Okay?
There's 6 posters.
How many do you have?
6 resolutions.
Well, she's got more. Rosie's giving you more.
But the objective is to.
2 each, you know, sort of 2 each poster. Yeah. And that will give us an idea of where the board is. Are you all spread out? Do you aggregate in some areas? We'll get a good sense of that, and then we can have a dialogue. But it gives you a chance to kind of interact with the data for a minute. Okay? Thank you, Rosie. Okay, have at it, 10 minutes. Okay.
All right, so in the interest of time, we have until about 2 o'clock for this discussion to save us 1 hour for the bike discussion. From 2 to 3, we'll have the bike discussion. So that means we kind of need to re-dive back into this one. We'll have until 2 o'clock. Sandy, you want to?
All right, I do, and if you don't mind, I'm gonna take notes and capture what I hear.
Sure.
All right. So we'll just kind of start with any general impressions, as you would spend a little more time with it, anything that's just gotta get off your chest as we start.
I guess I think I was talking earlier, but over to you. But there was, some things we were like, wait, what does that mean? Like trust and then trusting adults. And so when you said, well, we've just, we haven't synthesized the data yet, but we've just kind of put it out there for you to see.
Right.
So that makes sense because a lot of those things can mean something else.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see how we've talked about, I think I overheard you guys talking about resilience here, and that was such a big thing at some point, and maybe it was coming out of the pandemic. Yeah. And now it's like, okay, now what is it? It's like, we've gone over that talk, so there might be thoughts and ideas that we need for our students based on the times and things going on in the world.
Right. Okay. And that's the hardest thing, I think, right now. And that came up in a lot of the dialogues and discussion was the uncertainty of the future. And I think with the escalation of AI and the change in technology and the work landscape, that idea of how do we really, what do we need now, but what do we need 5 years from now and 10 years from now? And that forecasting is challenging.
What I've noticed is the word zone is very much getting a lot of attention from all of us.
I'm sorry, say that louder.
The word zone.
Yes.
3, 4, 6, 7, 8 dots over there. Move away from one size fits all, allocate resource based on individual zone needs, etc.
Yep.
And then over there, create zone pride. This 5, 6, 3, 4, 5.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to keep an eye on.
Yep, absolutely. Got it. Well, let's just, as you're still thinking, let's just start with commitments. Anything there, we talked about the trust and what does it really mean, who are we trusting, but I would say this, just the idea of trust is something that resonates with the community, however you want to spell that out. And as we define it, look at the other data, we'll try to expand on that. But I would say that was something, because you see it really in those 2 places, trusted adults and trust writ large, just this notion of trust. And so I think that's interesting that we had it in two different locations. Anything else around the commitments? So let me just hear from the board a little bit. As you think about, well, let me back up. Whatever we end up creating, whatever the board ends up adopting, it becomes your sort of rubric, right? Are we doing what we said we were going to do? These are the things that we value and committed to. Do our graduates look like what we said they should look like? That's our assessment at the end. And then the initiatives, are we doing the things that we said? And we focusing our resources, our attention, our energy on those things. So in terms of the commitments and thinking about how it might be applied, I'd just like to hear from the board. I mean, do you like the idea of really defining each of those discretely? Or do you like the idea of sort of a catch-all commitment, that's not wordy but concise, that really gets to the fiber of who you are in your DNA in Newport-Mesa?
I think catch-all is always best.
Well, to be used for what purpose?
To be, again, that idea, one of the things we used to do belief statements, now the commitments, there's value statements. It really just becomes those big ideas that you use again as a rubric. So I would use them as a principal, I would use them as a superintendent, with employees, with staff, with parents to say these are the things, and then they become embedded in what's happening in your classrooms, in your campus, with leadership, that those are notions that are we building trust? What's it look like? How are we doing that?
So where do board priorities that we have set now fit into all this? Are we then tossing those and replacing with that, or are we working in parallel with those?
That's a Wes question.
Yeah, so and you'll remember when we set those, we set them as 3-year board priorities.
Right.
Now we're in the 4th year, so strategically, this is the year then to reset that conversation. What I would say though is, One of them is academic achievement. So that's here, it's just defined differently now.
Right.
Based on everything you've heard,
Okay.
what do we want to specifically address within academic achievement? For example, the other one's social emotional or whole student support. Well, belonging is a part of this as well. So I don't think they're necessarily different, but this is that next iteration of where do we want to head now for the next 3 to 5 years.
And to follow up on that, it seems like there's 2 items going on, like the commitments discussion, to me, that's like the value statement for the district, a value statement.
Yep.
And then priorities, we have our whatever X number of priority areas now, they'll just be modified to be these other things, continuous improvement, academic system, whichever of that we decide, but those are priority elements, and this is just like a value statement of like, this district
That's
commits
exactly
to
right. Yeah,
supporting
right.
all
Yep,
students.
thank you. Yeah.
And I think like the ability to take risks is tied into trust. And the kids feeling emotionally safe, because something that I'm hearing from students is like, if they're afraid they're gonna not get an A, they're not taking intellectual risks. They're not willing to think outside the box, because they're like, well, the lady said I have to do this, so I'm gonna do this. And it's like, well, then she's teaching a robot.
Right.
So that commitment to having some critical thinkers being built.
You're definitely allowed to create critical thinkers.
Keeps coming up, yep.
Yeah, and in fairness, so very, very well said. With the commitments value statement, a lot of districts have vision and mission, and the community gets confused between what is what and what is the other, and they're both too lengthy to remember anyway. And so what we worked on is, what's new now?
Right.
And new now is a value statement, something that we can all remember. We don't have to be confused between 2 different statements. This is the statement,
This is it.
right? Like our senior supported SAVE is an attempt to be very, very focused with what we intend to do. So that's kind of the old language, kind of new language.
And I think on some of the other documents, we really did, thank you for that, because I didn't make that clarification today, that this is sort of your, I call them in some districts, the vision, right? It's your idea of like, what are we committed to? How are we getting there, both practically and in a lofty aspirational kind of way?
And then you said that I think it's great that we do have that vision, because then we could measure everything to that vision, including how our students are achieving, how our employees are performing, those kinds of things. And hey, are you hitting your trust and commitments?
That's
How
right.
are you hitting this? How are you hitting that? And then we could evaluate everyone off
Right.
of that.
And I've even seen boards then that use them for their own board self-eval.
Right.
You know, that, I mean, it's the idea that it all cascades through the organization. If we value that, how are we doing that? So, yes, that's what you want, is that rubric.
Right.
Anything else around commitments? I mean, I can see where you put your energies there, so that's helpful. And you can see again, there's redundancy, so as we really aggregate the data, we'll be looking for that as well, building up the ideas that came across in different ways in different places. Okay, let's move to a portrait of a graduate. And I had a conversation with Andrew, and I wanted to just say this here as well. For cognitive academic, you see that they put literacy. And I think it's different. What they're really talking about there is academic proficiency. We did hear that in the room, like when you graduate, there should be some guarantee that you are grade level, that you have some competencies. So I have seen that taken in different places to be, there's no doubt academically and cognitively, we expect our graduates to be proficient. So love to hear from the board if there's language around that, because I did ask for what was missing, and that was one of the things that came up, is this idea of academic proficiency.
Yeah, I think I put the dot because I figured that's what it meant. I think one of the pieces that being a part of DLAC all of these years and hearing firsthand from parents, there was a parent at the last meeting that was at my table who is a 5th grade parent at Adams, and her child had never been tested for LPAC, which was surprising and shocking, and we had a couple of staff people talk to her. And so when those realities are still happening and that child is getting ready to, matriculate up, the options are limited for electives. There's a far less likelihood that maybe that child from maybe his 4th grade or 5th grade teacher has been able to know, oh, he's actually at this level, but everything is coming back because he needs to get reclassified and needs to be remediated. And so those are the types of kind of system-wide things that I think we need to address, because that shouldn't be happening, right? And so that's on us as a system, that's on us as a district to identify where those gaps are still happening. So when a student that we're graduating, we have pride and confidence in knowing we're graduating someone with, I mean, again, it's the bare minimum, right? To I think most of us, and so that we need to, the expectation and the evaluations and all of that should be, every child knows how to read and we're doing everything we can do possible. And if not, that's on us. It's not, I think some of the previous conversations, you know, a decade ago or so, where there must be something wrong with the student, and the student isn't achieving. But when we're hearing those things that are happening within our system that we have control over, we need to address them and need to prioritize them.
Thank you. Got that. Carolyn had texted me as well as we think about the portrait of a graduate. Something that came up in a number of tables was this notion of do we value what we measure? Do we measure what we value? And so that idea of, as you think about, you know, the portrait of a graduate should be the things that you're investing energy in and that kids are held accountable for, right? In some way. So it's just a notion for you to tuck away as you think about what these qualities and characteristics are. So am I hearing some interest though from the board in perhaps something around the idea of academic proficiency, some language, so that becomes a criteria by which.
Some of the.
And it is over there. Yeah.
On the top over there.
Okay, so somewhere we're going to get that.
I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also
Right.
that could be brought into
Yep, okay.
life skills and that kind of stuff.
So you're all over the map on not completely, but on interpersonal skills.
ADHD.
Any conversation about that? I mean, collaboration, we talked about the human-centric skills and the things that we heard kids talking about and staff and parents and community members, that idea that you got to be able to work in a team in order to be successful, and that's going to continue. I mean, not in every field for sure, but in a lot of fields, and particularly the idea that people do isolate so much now, that then when they come to collaborate, and that's something that's bubbled up in the student groups that I've worked with in the last 6-8 months, is this idea that we don't have enough time to work on our speaking skills and working and collaborating with each other. So as you think about collaboration, what does that look like for you as a board when you think about students engaged in collaborative efforts and it's interpersonal?
My kids will say, my son says that he has plenty of collaboration. It's not too much.
Okay.
So
it's not it's somewhere, but not everywhere. Okay.
And I had actually both of them are kind of, well, for my older one who's on the spectrum is the best thing for him. Right. So, but my younger middle school and say that. One thing that I just want to touch on is why I put it out on empathy. Because I think for interpersonal, it's nowadays probably one of the most important things that we're possibly not teaching our kids. I think social media really stunts your ability to develop empathy. We are seeing it played out in how our students are treating each other. We had a mom come last night and tell us what happened to her daughter from a group of students or a group of kids that are students in a school somewhere. If they were, not ours, they live very close to our school, and they were most likely ours. So I have a hard time with hearing again from my younger son that lack of empathy, that lack of compassion is just treated as fine. I mean, why be nice to somebody? I mean, that doesn't look like you, or doesn't, talk like you, or is from a different place than you. So, and I think that issue is is big in our district, especially because it is a lot of the have and have-nots. Yep. And that disrespect coming from the haves, they can't be seen with the have-nots, they can't go to the have-not schools, is really prevalent if you ask any of the kids. So our ability to I think try to instill empathy in these kids, especially given what is surrounding them in the the world in general, but certainly what they see online, I think all the time, is big.
And I think when you think about it, conflict resolution and empathy,
It's
They're
huge.
kind of kissing cousins, right? So there may be a way to kind of combine those issues.
I think that all starts with respect. So, you build empathy if you respect people. You can collaborate with people if you respect one another. So to me, respect is very important. And also taking responsibility for your actions and who you are is super important. So it all stems from respecting one another.
I think a lot of these interpersonal, personal, cognitive, academic, all those kinds of things really have to be modeled by the folks that they are with every day. The empathy, how do you really teach that if you're not also showing that student empathy at some point? So I think, our adults that are around our students, obviously they're the teachers, but they're the teachers more not just in academic sense.
And I think that's the power of these documents ultimately is, again, they become these very visible expectations that are sticky, that people can wrap their heads around, and you kind of live into the aspiration of, to your point, if this is what we want, how are we modeling it, how are we living into it, how are we ensuring that it's trickling down to the organization. Anything there that Elsa, I want to make sure we're on time here as we move toward, because I think the initiatives may take a little longer.
I mean, I do think that conflict resolution and collaboration, all that kind of stuff goes together. I do think, personally from what I've seen is that in our younger grades, we're getting folks, students interested in or used to speaking in front of people. And through a lot of our social emotional learning, we've actually done that with the circle time we do, where they, maybe have a prompt and then they have to talk about it. But I think, starting a lot of those uncomfortable things early on, and that the kid realize that they didn't die and they're still okay and they can do it better, I think is
We've
really
been doing,
useful.
I know our teachers do a lot about helping our kids identify their feelings.
Yeah.
I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling all of that. I think we've done a lot of that to a certain extent.
And so again, back to then just the what do you want to continue? Even if you've done a lot, is that something that's so important to you as a board that we're going to name it, and it's got to be something that we're really pushing into?
Yes.
Because we're never done. That's the challenge, right?
One of the things that came up, like the advanced governance training that I did at CSK was on emotional intelligence. It was actually a very different discussion than what I think a lot of people thought it was going to be. And so I think that's something too that in training students, and that's something that was similar to like people who are in businesses study emotional intelligence and value that as a high skill, the conflict mitigation piece. So I think that also kind of encapsulates several of those, and maybe particularly as we're talking with teachers or with parents, that's the end goal. It's not just we're throwing some of these words out there. It's about because I saw self-awareness was up there, right? We didn't put a dot on it because it's not necessarily something I think that the board it's something that's maybe a skill that could be taught, but it also encapsulates all of those. But self-awareness is a huge piece of emotional.
And so remember, we're going to try to pull language from different places too. It may not be exactly what it is now, but hearing from you about what are those things you want to make sure you level up. And you can't have everything. This is our challenge. Is what are the key things? But I think you're right. The self-awareness, and I think what's interesting is that they named it that, and that people really kind of leaned into that idea. And it goes back to empathy. It goes back to are you aware? Are you respectful? Are you aware in this environment? So how do we capture that? So that's helpful for me.
Yeah, I think that whole idea of emotional intelligence, emotional scientists. I know we did Ruler for many years, and our teachers are very well, schooled in all that. And so I think that definitely needs to be. I like those terms, even emotional intelligence, emotional quotient, emotional. Scientists.
Okay.
Because then it does fit in a lot of these.
Okay, that's good. All right, I'm going to keep us moving. Let's just go over to belonging and safety, just because now I can just kind of go left to right here. Anything that you felt was missing from that? There was some unanimity around a couple of those ideas in a bigger way. anything you'd want to make sure as we try to figure out how to aggregate and create a couple of, overarching areas?
To me, there were two that were, I feel are interconnected, and I think one is more a tactic and one is a goal. And so, I think creating a climate and a cultural environment of social safety where students feel comfortable, seen, heard, supported, and safe before addressing their learning is similar to what we were talking about earlier with Maslow. And then the prioritizing, creating opportunities for connection for all classrooms, including professional development, staff education. I think those are interconnected. And so I wouldn't want to lose one of them because they support each other.
But for sure, work that we need to do is, because it's come up a couple places, is I said for sure work that we need to do, it seems like, is the creating the zone pride, or helping students feel, really good about the schools that they're going to, and parents feel good about the schools that they're sending their kids to. I don't think we talk about that enough, certainly on the Costa Mesa side. So, within, from my perspective, and Ashley's perspective, Leah's perspective, we want our kids to go to our schools. We know our schools are good. They could be better. I mean, all of our schools could be better. Ours could definitely be
But that is
more
a
better.
overarching sort of lens and something that the board's grappling with.
Yes, and it creates a lot of different issues within the district that would be great if we didn't have to deal with them. So I just think that is something we could definitely work on. We didn't talk about this really in our last strategic planning, but I don't think at all. So it would be good to think about how we do that. What would be the best way to do that? I mean, how are other districts, grappling with these issues? Certainly, people wanting to do inter-district transfers and inter-school, that's been going on for forever. But if we're all thinking that there's dots on that and that wherever else it is, now's a good time to, I think, really start addressing it. And to Cole's point, the population is changing in Costa Mesa. So, now's a good time.
Is zone the right word? Zone is a divisive, like.
Well, it may not be the word we want to use, but it's how they defined it. So we, how we define it and put it to the board to grapple with the verbiage, in the future. But I hear what you're saying. There may be,
I think that's
then that's your other districts.
It comes from the high
It is
school zones, so that's where the language was kind of introduced to them.
Some districts have zones, some have pathways, some have cohorts, like everybody has a little slightly different terminology.
It was historic.
Area zone, just
Okay.
like the geographic descriptor
Yeah.
that delineates where different populations are getting educated.
Yeah.
It's just a fact.
Yeah.
We can think it's negative, we can think it's positive, it's just reality.
It is, yeah.
But I think to follow up on Trustee Murphy's point about the belonging and safety, the stuff about the zones, I think that Trustee Crane pointed out, I think we'd be remiss to not see that through the lens of the high expectations and accountability, because the reason that, the elephant in the room, the reason that there is less zone pride in certain zones, the high expectations and accountability may not always be there. If you are seeing not high achievement levels, not high college going levels, or high, whatever exam score, whatever your metric is, if you're not seeing it.
To be blunt and honest, Leah's daughter is at CDM and my son is at Costa Mesa, and they are having entirely different experiences.
So one of the goals would be to ensure that you've got this consistent expectation, however we end up terming it, so that you're moving that for the whole organization.
Yeah, high expectations across all the zones, in all the neighborhoods, so that we are getting, because it's fascinating to look at the data and see, similar A through G rates now through our high schools. Similar levels of A, B, and C. All these things are very similar, yet you look at Estancia, 27% is going to college. You look at CDM and other sites, it's not 27%. It's quadruple. So you can't try to tell a community that Just come to your zone, be pumped up about your zone. Your zone might not be serving all the students it needs to serve.
And I mean, and certainly we understand that there will be, you know, it's not like and actually this goes across the entire district, not everybody's going to college. And I think we've all gotten away from that, which is very helpful. Not everybody's going to college, and that's okay. And certainly our focus on CTE, I think, is really helping families and students, you know, be okay with that. There's nothing shameful. There's nothing that they have to, you know, hide or not tell their friends or whatever. Or also for the kids who are struggling. I mean, there is something you will be successful at, or you can be successful, and we're going to help you get there. So I don't think that, you know, we're talking about, taking that away from our Costa Mesa schools necessarily, but really, it would be really great. What I would love to see is if my son was being challenged the way her daughter is.
So one of the things I'm thinking.
Can I
go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing before we get too far past it, because what we're talking about Costa Mesa and Estancia and that experience, I think something that was really interesting is when we saw the data about where students are going, one of the most surprised group were our Anderson Dean parents, the ones who were there and like, I never knew. Because in their mind,
Right, yep.
their kids stay and their kids go, and they were trickling through that system.
Yep.
And they were asking the question, well then why? What do we need to do? And so it's not just an issue that is of concern for one part of town.
No, I think
It was a shared concern in the
was,
room by all
Which is great.
constituents. Yeah.
Which is great.
It was encouraging, I thought.
It was very encouraging, and that people really grappled with that data. I will say that in that room on that day, and really
They
tried
should.
to. So I think that's why you're seeing some
But
of
that's
that.
something that the board doesn't get given unless we're asked. So like
Yeah.
I've asked for that data and done deep dives in it. Not everyone on the board probably even knows what that data is that was presented at that meeting. And so that's where too, there's a different reality as to what's happening if people aren't presented with the same information or digging deeper into that. And so when some of us are hearing from a parent who has a 1-year-old that they've just, they live across the street from a certain school, but like have to go to
Thinking
Davis.
about going to another one.
So like their child literally is not even in preschool and has like already just, has been told by outside people, you have to go to this school. Or people who have never stepped foot on a campus at College Park or Victoria and seen what rich environments they are and how everyone that's actually there and gets involved loves them. When people are hearing outside voices, they assume certain things. And so I think as a district, we need to do a much better job of communicating what those specific, I think it was mentioned on here, like what are some identity specializations, but that's also how we got to Davis. So it's also, it should be to me, having parents that are there share why they love it and why they stayed and why they're so excited. There's been an entire cohort of parents that have dedicated themselves to going to Victoria, Tewinkle, and Estancia for the past 15 years, and we continue to see that. And those families that have decided to do that are doing really well.
They're doing
and
great.
broke that narrative. But again, if people are only hearing about college rates and looking at, only test scores, and that was what my mother did. My mom's from Long Beach, and she went to the first integrated high school in Long Beach and was like, you're going to your neighborhood school. I went to Wilson. I went to Estancia. She was like, I'm not pulling you out. I don't care if half your friends are going to Newport Harbor or Edison. You're walking to school, and you're going to school in your neighborhood. That's how I'm here. So for me, it's I think we continue to, and that was 25 years ago. So I think this is a long-standing problem, and it's not going to get solved today. It's not going to get solved necessarily with this plan, but
It might.
I think
High
having a
expectations,
really
I think that's something we can all
clear
get.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us.
I wanted to finish my thought. So I think having a really clear conversation and direction around that is really important. Thank you.
So I think we have about 25 minutes left.
Can I ask one clarifying
Yes.
question on this one? My gut says, based on the other ones, that, and some of them you have unanimity around, so I feel pretty good about that. But with this topic in particular, although it got put under belonging and safety in the RUM, you also saw it in another poster. I'm wondering if the board's comfortable with it actually being maybe in a systems and resources, but in a different bucket than belonging and safety. I hear why it came up there, and I know what they were kind of thinking of, but I think it's a little more comprehensive than that. And would the board agree if we moved it into a different bucket?
Right, and it needs to be, I mean, I feel like we're kind of getting talked to, the Newport Beach area is kind of being talked at. I don't think, yeah, no, I know, but I mean, I'm just saying, I don't think any of us is gonna, none of us are gonna say no to high expectations.
Yeah.
And, I mean, well, Carol, it's a rewiring of how you think, and it has to start with us.
Right.
Carol and I walked over to Carol immediately, kind of like, and I said, hey, we're the same dog. And we went to each one of these, and we were looking for we're looking for the high achievers. We actually wrote on some of the things, and high achievers, because there's no high achievers anywhere. So that's how our minds work, and we need to, as a board, focus that way. We need to think, okay, we need to all have high expectations. We need to focus on that and getting all of our kids up to that. And none of us are against that.
No, I know,
We're
no
with
one's
you
saying
on
that,
that.
I know, but not saying that you're not.
Yeah.
The way I look at it
Yeah.
is for our students, is that where is the student now? And the student needs to go this way, no matter what zip code.
Yep.
No matter what zip code. That's what we have to focus on that. Student here, no matter what zip code, needs to end up that way, not that way. Or even flatlining, because some of our students who are, that's how we need to look at this. That's our mindset.
And that's, when you create the Portrait of a Graduate, you create these
Absolutely.
initiatives, it's for everybody. It's not,
Every kid is valuable, every kid is seen, all our students are all our students.
Right.
Because I push buttons, I want Costa Mesa to succeed, I want the parents to send their kids to their neighborhood schools. I mean, that's huge. But we have had, Costa Mesa and Newport has had a history of many parents sending their kids to private. Right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
so that's kind of also part of our culture, but how many? And they're losing out, in my opinion.
Well, for sure.
They are losing out, because we have amazing teachers, amazing programs, resources. Our direction is in the right trajectory. It's like, you're not going there, like, you're missing out.
Well, Carol, I don't think we're promoting the new resources that we do have, but we brought on
That's part of
so
our
many
goal then.
resources
Yeah.
to really support all of our students. That's not like one side or the other. The
Yeah.
resources are going to both. But I would just say, just one little thing, I was pushing you, Carrie, to get that postcard out to all of the the Mesa kids about what is good at Mesa, what schools the kids are going to.
Just like the Estancia.
From Mesa, from Estancia. And it was copied from what Edison, where my husband went. It was copied from Edison, because Edison was sending that to our parents. And then there was also one question that I had that Supervisor Foley brought up to me. How come she didn't get it? How come she didn't get that postcard?
You blacklisted her.
I know.
That's
And
just kidding.
so are we sending, so my question is, are we sending it to everyone?
Yeah.
Is it
Every
going
address.
to every address?
Every address.
in those.
We'd like to
Okay.
see
Maybe on a higher level
Good-
issue
good
though
to know.
is the former policies were built on a transfer policy that was to address not sending kids to private schools. It wasn't to create a system where children were going to their home school. It was to prevent people from leaving rather than staying within the district and staying at their neighborhood home. So there wasn't a dual purpose, or there wasn't an intention, because the current policy is not to have someone go to that school site first and meet with the principal. It literally, people are looking online or like Facebook or asking one person who's 7 years old, what do you think about the school from 20 years ago? So it's a very different piece, and for us as a system, we have access and ability to work on policy.
Right.
So for us, to me, the thing that is the higher level for us to start having conversations on is the transfer policy and how we're looking at that and how we're addressing the impact.
And so I think, and you're 2 steps ahead, because I think that's where you're all gonna go. Once you have these overarching buckets, then it's how do we build an action plan that starts to take apart what are the pieces, what are the policy pieces, what are the practical application pieces, what are the training pieces, what are all those elements that will help you guys move in that direction. That's a great point.
So, in the interest of time, so the belonging and safety elements can get moved to
got that.
other sections?
Yes, yeah, anything,
Under-
and so that's what I'm listening for, because what we bring back to you won't look like this. So we spend a lot of time aggregating, looking at the data, really trying to make sure that we've got evidence that supports that, as well as, one of the things that we have is your LCAP, and we have all your other documents, because this can't be outside of and completely erroneous to the work that you're already doing.
Yeah, and I think if we're moving along to the next ones, like the high expectations and the systems, I just want to clarify, the example I give of the 27% college going rate is not meant to say that everyone should go to college. We know that that's outdated, we all understand that, but I do find it difficult to believe that we have 40%, like a 40-point gap in college going rate. So, I mean, if 80% of CDM goes to college, cool, 20%'s not. They're being entrepreneurial, they're going to the military, whatever, that's fine. But I find it very hard to believe that we have one school that is dozens and dozens of points lower on that particular bar than others. And in my mind, I want to have it be more equal, because if it is so much lower, then what is that telling us about the high expectations and accountability that we do or don't have at that site? That is keeping it substantially lower, because the insinuation would be that our lower income kids can't perform and get to college, and that is just
Not true.
purely wrong. So that just always needs to be, so yeah, I don't want to get caught up in what percent should go to college, but tell me the college going rate for our 4 other schools,
But
and
it's
then tell
about
me this
backward
one.
mapping and saying, do we have all the right pieces in
And
place
does
to
that
actually
make any
create
sense?
that?
So I think as long as we're all clear on that the expectations and accountability are across everywhere.
About data, about looking at developing and implementing a system to measure the effectiveness and allocation of resources. And there's 3 dots.
Anything else for the high expectations accountability?
To your point, yeah, I do know that, I'm sorry. Andrea, who's talking? Sorry. So to your point about college track, A through G, I know Dr. Shaka did a presentation on how we need to have a higher standard for the AG, because we were at like
But that's the thing, they're very similar now. The A through G achievement across our school from the 150-page PowerPoint we just looked at last night, they're actually now equal, pretty much, the A through G and
so that's a step in the right direction.
So they now all reach A through G, so why are these ones going to college with their A through G and these ones aren't? So that is my issue, that is what I'm curious about.
And that's where it could be, what we might see is the counselors and their expectations. I mean, not to throw counselors under the bus by any stretch of the imagination, but the culture and the folks who are helping them get to their next place, working on maybe what their achievement, what their idea of achievement, a higher expectation could be for those students.
Affordability, I mean.
That's
That goes to me into, I like that these are both on the same slide on our, to me, the systems and the high expectations and accountability are joined. So like, for me, one of the things that, rather than, I think some people are like, again, this is a different conversation than the assets in each zone that are currently in place. But I think something that we have struggled with as a district and historically is each zone was its own fiefdom. And so it was really determinate on who was the principal, what was going on that campus. And so I think there's still a huge question of what is our system. What is, we have not had systems in place for a long time. So what is our system? What does it look like for support and resources at our district? And do every single person on that campus know, from a janitor to the principal to a parent to a community partner? If a child is struggling, there was something on there about the first thing was behavior intervention. No, maybe that child just needs one trusted adult. And so I don't think, and this is why I'm thankful and I'm glad that we're doing this, and I think it's a reason why, we don't have a clearly defined system and pipeline who to contact even. And so to me, for the high expectations, it was developing and implementing a system to measure the effectiveness of allocation of resources to maximize improvement and academic growth, but it's also having individualized expectations and appropriate supports for students. A 15-minute parent meeting twice a year is insufficient, and that's happening in a lot of our schools, elementary schools. So if you don't have a parent who has the time to access our 14 apps or have the confidence to go and speak to the principal if something is happening in their classroom, that's a systems problem that needs to be addressed. And parents, I think a lot of it is expectations, counselors, but also parents not knowing what the direction could be for their student. And so to me, it's about what is our system and how are we distilling that, and then how are we empowering parents?
And I think to go back to the system point about what you do with each child when you encounter them or encounter them, to what Trustee Murphy has said about training the counselors. I know from my own experience in high school, I was told to not apply to any private universities because you're poor. You should just go to your state school. Straight up told me that. And that's awesome. You know, like, is that really what you want? And so if they are doing that to our kids here in this day and age, still, you're going to see different outcomes in who goes to college and who's like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't go. So, I mean, we have a situation where we have early college that is like half population of early college is from Estancia zone. They're all going to college. So how's that happening? So why can't that be true at Estancia? So I just want to know where's the accountability and expectations, and just make sure that they're everywhere.
It would be so great if we could track the CT, what goes on after CTE. 50% is going to college, and 50% are becoming, becoming, plumbers and making $200,000 a year.
It's coming soon. We'll have that.
Yeah, they track it.
The data we have right now is really bad.
We do some level of tracking and surveying, but the state is actually leaning into it to be able to collect longitudinal data finally.
It's just taken a while to get it all.
10 years.
10 years. Who's counting, right? No, we've been waiting for this for a long time. All right, anybody else around this high expectations accountability? All right, systems and resources. I think we've touched on systems. Obviously, I hear the need for that thread. You seem to have unanimity around that first bullet. So that's a good one. Anything else anybody wants to say about that as we try to aggregate that data for you? All right, academics. Again, there's different ideas there. There's some overlap there though, and so we'll look at the language based on where you kind of rang in. Anybody want to hit anything on that?
Just do want to lift up again, because the parents were very, very clear, and it's one of the first ones, that they are interested in what they call innovative technology literacy. So AI can be something different tomorrow. It wouldn't surprise the industry. And so how do we make sure that on top of all the other high expectations we have for students, numeracy, literacy, critical thinking, that we also are, they're prepared for that as well.
But I'm so afraid that AI is going to take away all the critical thinking.
But that's I think why those human skills are the things that the experts are saying. If we don't ensure that those students have that, they certainly will lose those human skills. And then what is their value?
But I do think the financial literacy that people are mentioning, and I know we've mentioned it for a long time, even when Trustee Bartow was here, we talked about it, whether the kid wants to be an entrepreneur and be financially literate, or whether that kid wants to push back on that counselor telling them they can't afford college, and they have the financial literacy to figure out, no, actually if I do A, B, and C, I can go to college. So that financial literacy piece, if we as a district can figure out where we integrate it, where do we put it, where does it sit, how do you do it? Do you do it online, do you do it in the summer?
Do all of our parents get the FAFSA information? We have that coming out in multiple ways.
But I think one of the things, there's a lot of elementary schools that have elementary students who are starting their own businesses. So I think waiting till someone's in high school to start thinking where they're going to college or what financial literacy looks like is far too late. To me, there's big pieces like in kindergarten and first grade, some of those basic standards are learning about your community. One of the field trips kids had gone to in the past was going to a bank, going to different places. There's really, again, like as we talked last night about math, a K-12 alignment, there can be pieces in every level of what that looks like. And I think now, that's something that it has started to be talked about more at the state level, but there's a lot of local people, and there's lots of local organizations that are doing that work. To me, I don't even know that it needs to be something, I mean, to me, it's just something I think we all are in agreement that needs to happen. So what that looks like, I'm not sure. I think that's a how for the district to do, but I think we're all in alignment that
But the what?
that needs to happen and quickly.
Isn't there a legislation for,
Yes.
financial
And we have
literacy?
2 pilots right now.
They're not making it a grad requirement, I think they're hoping not to make it like,
80/29/27, it's by 2031.
okay.
Yeah.
So, a long way off, so mitigatingly, what is the district, you know,
Trend is-
can, okay.
Because the pilots are.
We have 2 pilots
right now.
That's,
She's-
Ensign?
She's going to get to this eventually, but I think something you just said is a great segue into this, because really the intention isn't to do anything very quickly, not to delay it, but to be intentional about our next steps. And so I think we want to set a context for the community that this year is the year to develop the plan, right? Next year is then the time for us to develop how to accomplish those tasks, and where we can begin, right? But I do want us to be careful not to suggest to the community that next month
Right.
we will be a different district because of the conversation we had
Please,
today.
no.
And even next fall, that we'll be significantly different, because we're spending this year, right, really thinking through what, right? What is the what you want, so that we can develop the how.
And the one more thing, like financial, definitely, however you need to do that, but the second thing is science. Our science scores are relatively ridiculously low compared to the county, and it's kind of tragic, so I don't know why or how to fix that, but science is just particularly low in this district, and I don't know how we're gonna train future scientists, and I think you're seeing the kids, once they get to high school, really struggling with the sciences because they have had like zero base exposure, and it's really hitting them hard in the high school, it seems.
The beauty of it is you don't have to worry about the how.
Yes.
You, as a body, have to agree that's one of the priorities,
That's
right?
right, that's right.
You have to
Does
say
science
science is a priority, financial literacy is a priority, period, stop. You know, that's it. And
But it's
then
also
expect the
empowering-
data.
It's empowering the teachers that we have, so we're one of the only districts that has science teachers.
Mhm.
So if we have science specialists, do they know and are working with, again, it's a system. Are they working with the high schools, are they working with middle school to see what the alignment should be? Are they working backwards? Like, those are those pieces as a teacher, you work backwards. So that's, again, on us to address, but it shouldn't be happening across the district because it's been a priority for like 25 years.
I think we're focusing their work, so you're absolutely right. You guys have made a large investment in the science specialists.
Yeah, I was gonna say, didn't we just approve a new science curriculum?
And we have a lot of things going on in
Yeah.
science.
You guys have made a tremendous investment, so I'll just be refining the work that we do with that. I think you will see better gains in the future and better academic outcomes.
That is going to be the future of work that AI can't do.
Yeah.
So,
So
besides being a plumber.
So one of the challenges is, as we said, the depth and breadth of the work that you're trying to oversee, right? And it never ends, and it is iterative. Things that I always use the spinning plate analogy, because as soon as we take our eye off this plate, it starts wobbling while we're trying to get all these going. And so your goal is really in this work to try to be as narrow as you can. I mean, all these are going to be big, broad pieces, but then to work with staff as they come up with action plans to really have only the plates spinning that you can keep spinning, because what happens is every time our attention gets taken off that spinning plate, then stuff happens. So if I've got 3 that the board has said, and I'm not going to give you just 3 initiatives, but you understand what I'm saying, the more that as you think about this and grapple with the writing of it, to help the staff say, these are the things. If we could work on high expectations and systems that support that in every academic area, TK-12, whatever that is. So think about it as they're sort of a 4-lane highway, but it's all going in the same direction. It's still broad, but we don't have a bunch of multiple lanes that are kind of tying things up. That wasn't a good metaphor at all, so just let's let that slide.
We're moving into bikes, so.
I know, okay, good. Oh, good. So that was good that I got on and kind of walked. What's going to happen now is we're going to work on taking your input. I'm going to take a picture of all this stuff, or Rosie will help me. I did want to thank Rosie and Sam and staff for making those. I mean, it's like, I was teasing that it's kind of like holding a small wedding, you know, and it really, because it's a lot to do to get all that prepped, and it was a huge part of making those days successful, and your cabinet as well, because they just did an amazing job teaming up everything. We're going to, start working with staff on the drafting and how they want to go about that. And then in the next step, and these are not, completely definitive and descriptive, because we'll work with Wes after this to see, how he wants us to approach it. But really what will happen with the committee that was here, and I told Cole before he left, that we still have a job to do, because what will happen with the draft is it will also go back to that body that worked with us initially, because we want them to say, yeah, that captures, because they saw everything, they heard everything, everybody in that room read every poster that was put up, they heard the students, they experienced the same thing. So we want to make sure that it resonates with them, and that if we've missed something in that, but they'll see that if it wasn't here, they're going to find it over here. So I think that's a really important part of this step. And then that we start to then work on revising it. It comes back to you for the real wordsmithing and grappling with it and making sure that those are the priorities. Of course, we'll be working with staff in between, and then any revisions, and then that adoption, and how the board president and your superintendent want to put that together on the agenda. So that's just the gestalt of what we'll be doing in the future.
Any questions?
Yeah, a quick one. Typically with such a process, how much awareness to the public and the parent community, aside from the 100 and our task force work is done typically, just to kind of show that we are working towards something, so that they feel like they've been involved through the process by, if anything, awareness.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, typically, especially if we get a draft, every community is a little different, and so how we do this in different places. In some places, they just take it from here and the board adopts it and it's disseminated. I mean, to be quite frank, that is, it's very sort of linear and closed. In other places, this part where we do ask the folks, and I'll work with Wes on this as well, when we have kind of a draft, we do ask the folks who were there in the room to be the ambassadors. So if you're connected to other parents, if you're a student representative, if you're a, whatever, would you please, share this, take it home to your parents, take to the chamber meeting, whatever it is, so that they can get some input, because that network of it really does help. And then sometimes there will be other, groups that people want to take a look at it. We should publicize, you should publicize that meeting where you're really grappling with the draft, because people will pay attention and they will come and they'll say, I didn't see this, I didn't hear this. And so I think that's a really important part of the process. The other thing that we say with this, now is it's a living document. Mm-hmm. And so, there may be things that over time you hear from the community, like we left that out, and you want to work with staff to put that, elevate that up, or put something in. That will and can happen. But I think you'll be surprised that you have covered enough, and there's enough information here and enough work from staff and from the board that you really will capture directions that people will hang their hats on, that you really will come up with a few initiatives that people go, okay, this is where we're headed, this is what a graduate looks like, this is what we're committed to. And then, unless it's written in stone, everything is revisable. And so I always encourage people not to get so anchored that you can't. We had a process in my last district where every year we revisited it and we changed words, and when we put it back out, we changed the color of it. We wanted it to always look fresh and new and reflect where we were at that moment in time. I mean, let's just say we don't call anything, let's just say we have a meltdown and none of us are using technology. You would have to come back and revise that. But there may be things in the landscape that you suddenly say, this is more important and we need to somehow elevate that up. So that's just saying the work is never done, I guess.
If I could ask, and I don't know if, what the process has been in other districts that are our size, but for me, I would like there to be, my request would be that there's an opportunity prior to the draft even being formalized for this to go back out to school sites and to our parent groups. So to me, we have a lot of groups that there may be representation, but I mean, there's 22 parents that were part of this. To me, it's really important. We've done a lot of work in building up our PTAs. To me, what has been shared, or even like the notes from today, should go back to sites, and particularly for our sites who may not have a lot of people that are able to attend full day meetings. Well, I mean, I think, to me, 22 parents needs
Well,
much more.
out of conceivably 30-something thousand, probably.
Right, so to me, I think it should go before we get a formalized draft. A lot of this work that we did today and with this group should go back to the school sites and to some of to the CAC, to DLAC. Here's what's being discussed. Do you have anything to add to the draft? Because I think my concern is once a draft is formalized, we're at step R. You know, we're so far along the process. And while I think it's great to have, higher representation than we anticipated, it's so low based on the numbers of the size of our district. So
I think one of the challenges is, and I'll just put this out there, on those 2 days, one of the things that we work really hard at is setting up a foundation for everybody in the room. So the challenge is, and I'll work with Wes to see what next steps you think about in terms of that. They don't have the same foundation. So in fact, I talked to a district that did that when I was, starting this a year ago with another district, and they said it wasn't helpful because they were saying you need to focus on this, but that's not what the data say. So how do I now incorporate that? I think that just becomes a challenge. They just don't have the same hooks to hang it on. On the other hand, I do think when you have a draft and there's some structure to it that people can kind of understand, then getting feedback. I hear what you're saying, and I think this is the challenge because now they're always rebutting data that they don't really have any context for. So that's
I think there's an interim process.
Yeah, I think, and then we can think about what that might be.
Well, I think there's a process that you've explained, and I think we have to be careful of going against the process unless it's the consensus of the board. So if we have one trustee that wants to take it in a direction that isn't in the planned process, I think that's problematic. I think we have to then have a conversation about how do we want to pivot.
Well, then I think it would be helpful to be much more clear and make sure that there's a wide on-ramp to sharing the draft.
Okay.
So the information that was shared with this strategic group should be shared with everyone that's getting that draft. So those are the transfer information. A lot of that stuff is not private, nothing that we do. We can't even have a conversation in private. So none of that is a secret anything. So what I think if we're going that route, then there could be perhaps we add a link on our website, which again, a lot of this to me is we're still operating like it's 1955. So there should be a link then on our website. Here are the documents, here's the data that was shared within the strategic planning group. Here's the draft, and here are the timeline that people need to know so they can get them on their calendar. Weeks and months in advance, so we can make sure to get all of that information from all of our stakeholders.
And if I can just add, as someone that's facilitated these kind of processes a billion times, I completely agree with Sandy that without the context, without that 150-page PowerPoint, getting people to just weigh in freelancing is very dangerous, actually. And I love community engagement.
And then you don't incorporate their feedback, and then that's
I get
that. So it's but I do think there is room though for to the suggestion of that 150-page PowerPoint. People should be able to see it.
No,
so however we want to do that,
they should.
So that then if they do get curious, then it's
Put on our website.
read this and then wait.
It'll avoid us getting accused of not.
Right.
Sharing.
And I do think, especially to your point, as you're getting closer to adopting or giving input on a draft, where there's some I think having some structure to it's helpful, and I think having principals share, hey, the board's going to look at a draft, here it is. If you have any concerns or questions, come to me. I think having that funnel is really helpful, and I do think people care more about what their principal says than the superintendent. No offense.
I show up at a PTA meeting. Carol and I show up at PTA
And to your PTA meetings.
Share.
I do too. And also to our staff. So we had a lot of staff representation, but not everyone was taking 2 days off.
Yeah.
Our staff also needs to be aware. I haven't seen this document. I haven't seen it. So our staff needs to be aware before the draft goes out too, that they can access that on the website and give input. I think we need to do a heightened level of communication, and I really want to see that with this. Thank you.
I do have to say, I got 3 personal phone calls after you guys had your thing. One from a CAC member, and all just raving at how amazing this was, and way better than what they thought that they were stepping into. I would say, but how like they really felt important. They felt like they really had a voice, and you know, those people are powerful because we nominated people that we know are part of our community. So I do think that we have a really good start.
Yeah.
And I do agree with her that once we have the draft, if we can get it out there again, it'd be interesting. It's probably going to be the 5 people that watch our meetings. You know, I don't really think there's going to be a whole
But I
lot
know
more.
the accordion process
at least we
is
did it.
really
But I think that the process
transparency.
you did was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So any final comments before we move on to bikes? It's 2:08. We did pretty good. Anybody else? Well, thank you.
Thank you all, and I'll be seeing you before too long.
Thank you so much. All right, so next we move to the bike safety discussion. Can we check on? Okay. So it's 2:09. We'll move into the bike, and with that, we do have one public comment. So we should get that. Is the person here? Okay, perfect.
Hi, my name is Jim.
Hold on one second. Hold on one second.
We got a mic and a timer for you.
Hold on one second. We're beginning the bike safety discussion at 2:09, and Pearson, Trustee Pearson, can you read?
Hold on one second.
Read the, sorry. The community statement.
Say one.
Say one.
This is an opportunity for the public to address the board regarding items on the special meeting agenda only. Comments on special meeting agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per comment, up to 20 minutes per topic. The speaker may not relinquish his or her time to another person.
Thank you. Mr. Jim
Kasuba.
Kasuba.
Yes, I've been a long-time resident of Newport and then New York and Boston, so, you know, I bounced around over the years, but the thing that alarmed me was, like, I lived in that neighborhood when I was in my 20s, and then I moved away and moved to Coto del Mar in New York, Boston, come back, right? And then everything switched. Like, over a lot of little things happened over like 30 years. And all of a sudden, all the drop-offs that were occurring, like on East 15th at the entrance of the high school and Ensign, all moved off to the other side of Irvine. So we kind of started, people were getting knocked down in the streets, and it's also against the regulations and design standards. So we started complaining, and we did get some progress, but that's kind of stalled. And the problem is, a lot of that all happened years ago before the regulation changed. Like back in the 80s and the early 90s, there were no regulations about drop-offs and the bike lanes. Everything was different, and they locked it all in. So now no one wants to change it because it upsets all the neighbors. I mean, there's a lot of big money homes around there, and nothing upsets people more than like bikes on Cliff Drive, right? Which is, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's where that is, right? So thanks to Ensign's massively better. It could be even better. There's still a problem there, but it's probably about a fourth of what it used to be, right? There's some easy changes we can make there with pedestrian if they were to add more drop-off space along Coral Drive. Because there's still a problem with people. There's not enough places like at dismissal, like the way that engineers look at that, is they go and they see if all the drop-off space is filled at dismissal. If they still see cars across the street, they look for more space adjacent to the campus, right? And same thing in the morning, you have people dropping off in the bike lane on Irvine because they don't have, they're walking into a bike gate and they don't have a drop-off spot anywhere near that. So they're dropping in the bike lanes and there's kids in the bikes on the bike lane. So putting that aside, we're also looking at the intersection in front of the high school because the reason that a lot of the drop-offs stopped at Ensign and also at the high school is they used to be able to loop around on St. Andrews. Like on Ensign, they used to go along the back side and drop off on Coral, and then they'd make a left on St. Andrews, and then a left on 15th, they leave the area. But then Newport came in and they put those, they changed everything when they put those brick things in the front of the school there, and now you can't see, so people stop going that way. It's too dangerous, right? So it kind of cut off the drop-offs on the back of Ensign, and also the drop-offs at the front of the high school. Kind of pushed everybody out into Irvine. So we've been pushing on that. And Newport's been giving us kind of a sketchy reason. Like, you know, I used to be an engineer before I I was a Wall Street guy, but before I was a trader, I used to work as an engineer in land development. So I kind of had an idea how that all works. So we're ready to go to the state with that. We didn't want to do that because we kind of like those guys, but at this point, is that it? Can I ask one more thing that's really important? It's actually really,
You can always email us and then we'll all get it.
well, it just take me 30 seconds, is right now there's that safe, this is important for my neighbors, there's a Safe Streets to School initiative, and that's important to us because when you take funding for that, you have to follow design standards. You can't do that kind of stuff they're doing now where they just like, you know, explain it away. So it's really important that we see the plans before they make any changes because we really want to see if there's any more violations of design standards before they move forward with anything that's...
So we can reach back out to you. Wow, the Safe Routes to School stuff is
Yeah,
definitely
well, the
going
plans,
forward.
there's a set of engineers and architects that are all professionals. We'd like to take a look at those before they move ahead with.
Sure, we'll connect you to
That's
the people
highly
that are
important.
doing that. Sounds good, thank you.
I'd appreciate your time, guys.
Thank you so much.
And I appreciate if you can help us get that instant drop-off thing in the back. And that thing fixed in front of the high school, you can't make a
Definitely,
left.
we hear you. Thank you so much, thank you.
You guys have a good day.
All
Sorry.
right, you too. Thank you. All right, Dr. Torres?
Yeah. Okay, so you guys received this PowerPoint, so we're going to go ahead and kind of breeze through this. Some of this is information that maybe some of you have already seen. I know we have new trustees since the last time we talked about bike. I'll be quick. But you're here today really to be able to have an opportunity to learn a little bit about what we do with bike safety, some of our current challenges, and for you to be able to have a discussion about where you want to see bike safety go. And with me, behind me, is the team that works boots on the ground. Sarah Coley, our Administrative Director, Paula Litz, our Coordinator of Elementary, and Dr. Jen Pena, Coordinator of Secondary, who actually execute the work on the sites. So they're here in case we have any specific questions. As a board, you know that policy is your thing. We've heard that a couple of times today. So as you listen today, just remember that these are some of the grounding policies that we have in the ARs that accompany them to be able to discuss and kind of create policy around bike safety and safe routes to school. So that's 5030 and 5142. We do a lot of this work in partnership. We just heard our community member Jimmy speaking, but we have community, we have our internal partners, and then we have outside vendors. We have the city. We have a lot of people whose hands are involved in supporting our bike safety programs. One of the new things that was not available yesterday that is now available today is just some information and data on bike collisions. So we talk about the why we're here, why you care so deeply as a board about bike safety, is because we know that kids are in accidents. And so while we have many citizens that are in accidents, our priority is our students. And so you can see that for the city of Costa Mesa, by October 31st of this year, we had several bike accidents. Costa Mesa does a great job breaking it down by age group. Newport Beach doesn't break it down by age group. They just break it down by number of incidents, which is 59, and all the different reasons why they crashed, but also by October 31st. And so just tells you that this is an issue for our community. We do a lot of student training, and bike safety has been a thing in Newport-Mesa, but in 22-23 we were charged, the board said, hey, you need to do a little bit more, let's keep going. And then by 24-25, we had some well-established training practices. And so, again, you didn't have this in your original packet because we were getting this information, but we have all of the data for students who have been trained. Elementary schools, we do whole school trainings, and we have vendors that come in and support that. We have walking rollers, and then at secondary, we have a variety of different programs that we use to be able to do that. In 25-26, which is our current school year, it's an ongoing process. We started that in August, and we continue to work through that. We have some asterisks there that you'll see. Those are upcoming events. We've had weather issues and other things. We have to move things around. But we continue to train our students. It's an ongoing process. We'll be doing a highlight as the holidays come, and with Annette, our PIO, to be able to remind people as they get gifts for the holidays. And a bike comes from maybe Santa Claus, that we can get them trained, right? Because we know that students get bikes at different points in the year. One of the things that you've seen before is just the volume of bikes. Community members speaking on just the number that are in the streets. And so this is for the city of Costa Mesa and all of our Costa Mesa schools. You'll see we did go out and count those bikes. Those are accurate numbers. And then you'll look at Newport Beach, same thing. Just a large volume of bikes with that number only increasing. And then just thinking about, in elementary in 24-25, we really started to really get those interactive assemblies going for our students, and we really hosted things by zone. We really tried to get more synergy behind it, and we continue to do that. One of the new things is we're interfacing more deeply with Newport Beach Police Department. They are leaning in hard to this, and they've been able to provide a very similar experience that we've done in Costa Mesa in Newport Beach schools. That's ongoing right now. And then secondary, we had done some work, and we tried a lot of different things with secondary students. They're a harder audience to capture, as you could imagine. So we've tried different tools, different vendors, different programs to see which one sticks. We started a sticker program. We basically, permitted them, and then we've asked kids to register with Project 529 as well, which was brought to us by Harbor Council PTA. And then in 25-26, all of that continues. Deep relationships and partnerships with both police departments. Some of you as trustees have been involved in those conversations as well. And then we've reached out to other school districts just to learn best practices. Today is really about you talking, telling us about ideas and thoughts that you have about how we can improve this practice and keep our kids safe and our community safer. But I wanted to make sure that you knew that this work was going to continue, some of the things that were highlighted in the presentation, and that throughout this school year, we will continue to work with elementary schools, with secondary. We are doing parent communication on bike safety tips, bringing in by zone parents and trainings to bring people in. We had a lovely one at Estancia that the city of Costa Mesa helped partner with in August to kick it off. We had kids from all around the district who came, and those types of events will continue as we move throughout the year. And then we're always, just to my point about the holidays, always looking for opportunities as the year goes on with students, like getting new cars, right? They come when they get new bikes to be able to work with our sites to say we need to be able to retrain and redo. So that's just kind of a little bit of information to ground you in current status. But
thank you so much. So, is it Trustee Wygand is back? Thank you.
Sorry.
No, perfect. Just in time for the bikes. So it's 2:20, so we have about 40 minutes until 3 o'clock. So with that time, what we were really hoping to do is figure out from all of you, you see all the tactical steps that our district is doing, what we all want to weigh in. We want to hear what kinds of, do you have ideas? Do you think, for instance, the policy committee should take up examining those two bike-related policies? Do you think there should be some kind of task force? If so, who would you like staff to convene for such a task force? Those kind of elements that are more in our purview than the nitty-gritties of the hows, of the kinds of ways they do training, but more on what are the policies and or task force, working group, things that you'd like to see. So with that, we just open it up, and anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, I think this is near and dear to my heart. I think that because we get a lot of comments about e-bikes, like I think the number one comment from the community and also from parents really is, at least in the Harbor Zone, is about e-bikes. And they kind of take over, and no parent really wants to give their child an e-bike. They do it because of peer pressure, or they, mostly peer pressure, mostly getting to and from. And granted, that is the parents, they bought it, so it is their onus as well. But looking at this, and it's been probably since the pandemic, it's really, really increased. And the danger to our students it's really increased. So specifically this year where we've had deaths, we've had broken jaws, we've had, just last week, we had someone knock out their front teeth even though they had braces on. And those teeth aren't coming back. And that was just, my neighbor that was in seventh grade. And those are things that wasn't reported by the school. That's just things that I hear as from being around the community. There's a correlation between these e-bikes, the speed, the age of the student that's just not aware of how to utilize those well enough. And I don't know what kind of training or anything would really help that. As I'm looking at what to do with these e-bikes and kind of considering like some of our like work that we do strategic wise, like how do we get our kids to be maybe more, resourceful and safe and trusting and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if giving a child an e-bike and letting them come on our campuses is really the best thing to do. Before e-bikes, we all had regular bikes that they rode to campuses. In my vision, I would envision not allowing e-bikes to come on our campuses anymore. And with that being said, I know that Newport Beach PD has put in their new municipal code that they passed a month ago that if anything is, they will tow e-bikes. If there's e-bikes around campuses or around, let's say, neighborhoods, they have the right to tow those e-bikes away and make
Tied
sure.
to a tree, for
Tied
example?
to a tree. They have now that ability to take the e-bike and then the parents will have to come and pick it up.
There's
So-
no like tow yard?
Yeah, I mean,
It's good
yes,
business.
they're gonna have.
Probably.
So in my view, that will prevent these families from needing to buy that e-bike or feeling that they need to buy this e-bike. And then, eventually those e-bike riders will be less and less and less and stop creating those issues. Like that woman that came to our meeting last week. It was yesterday, I'm sorry. It was heart-wrenching to hear what those e-bike and the amount that these e-bikes give those students such feeling of power over others. And I haven't seen really a great thing come out of e-bikes. So that's my story.
Next, Trustee Anderson, and then Trustee McElroy.
I would actually like to bring the city representative that's here to just explain. I would love if you could just share some of what the city of Costa Mesa has been doing. Because I think some of the punitive or attempting to restrict it is not necessarily the reality of what's going to happen. I think when we have Kaiser is the #1 soul of bike ridership that continues through all of the years, including in Paper Harbor, because it is hard to park at those schools. And so I would just love to hear what you have seen or maybe anything you wanted to share before we make decisions.
And I think a point of order for this, because we have such limited time together, I really was hoping we could hear from the trustees at this moment in time and then definitely reach out to the city and have a further conversation. But for today, since we're all in one room, which as we never are, and we can never discuss things freely, to just hear from everybody here substantially on what they'd like to see for the bikes. And then definitely, this is an ongoing conversation, so we'll absolutely hear from the city at a future time, but for today, to keep it in this time that we have, 35 minutes.
Okay, well then I think,
Here.
okay, well rather than that, something that I've been asking for, I think for over a year now, is to have that meeting. So, which is what I wanted this meeting to be. My goal for having a bike safety study session was not have it on this agenda. To me, this is a meeting that needs to happen at night, so parents can attend, stakeholders can attend, a lot of people can be involved, including students. And so it's here's where we are, here are hearing from students, which we have seen and heard is really helpful. What are their experiences, why are they doing what they're doing? Hearing from parents and having our city partners, which I think, the city of Newport isn't here. I don't know that they were invited. I don't know that they got this. We didn't have some of this data because I don't think we have been partnering well with our city partners and utilizing all of their data and all of the things that they have been doing with our school sites. So my request is a study session in the evening with community partners, with parents and students, and that it would be, I would like to see one that is perhaps city specific and then one that is joint, because I think one of our problems is we have students and the Estancia zone particularly who are crossing cities, and I think we have parents who ride their e-bikes, don't know rules, that are crossing cities. And so I want us to make sure that we're not considering this in silos, which we sometimes do, that we're talking about it together. And that we're doing that holistically. Some of us have been working on this for quite some time, and so
But I do think since we're here, like you said,
Exactly.
President,
So I think from what I'm hearing, Trustee Anderson, if we can have perhaps some kind of working group or some kind of task force working group that not only is city specific, and which I think there is one group that meets in Newport, so then a Costa Mesa, equal, and then those two groups kind of coming together at some point to discuss that and having an opportunity to invite community members. In terms of like formally saying like a night meeting, like night meetings are difficult for a lot of parents, so we'll figure out when is the best time that staff thinks that they can pull off those meetings, and hearing from students is also important to figure out how to integrate that. But I think again, it's like in the things that must be happening is hearing from students, hearing from parents, having both cities involved, both cities kind of come together, kumbaya, and as long as those elements happen, we kind of leave it to staff as like how that happens, but if those are the key elements, then we can move to Trustee McElroy and then Pearson, and then we'll come back.
Respectfully, that's not my direction. That's not my request. My request is to have a study session where the community can be involved, because we have been having small groups, we have been having those conversations, and I think at this point, when we've had deaths particularly, we need to start doing a broader public messaging and broader community engagement. I don't think in my opinion, continuing to do smaller groups is not, I'm worried next week we'll have a death. So I want to make sure that we're addressing this as a community, a whole community, quickly. I think the outcome of that can be continued, task forces, but my concern is something happening soon, so.
Okay. So you're thinking does that require like a public meeting of the board, or are you thinking more of a working group, which Trustee Antonio suggested?
Again, my request is for a night study session for the community. No.
Okay, so not a public meeting of the board.
Not a board-directed meeting. Well, to me, the goal would be a study session, like a study session that the city does. So the study sessions I have gone to with the city are interactive. We don't limit someone. I feel horrible cutting you off. He could probably speak for an hour on this topic. He's very knowledgeable.
I do have a lot of information you can talk to. I just don't have the time to write it all down.
Right, a study session. What I would like to see is more similar to what other entities do, where there's interaction from the community. The community can have those conversations. To me, this is one piece, but I really caution us, and yes, we can give some basic direction today. I think there's other factors involved that we need to hear from parents and students and our city experts and community experts before we do anything. And so that's what I'm saying. Is that clear?
So Sam and Rosie are taking notes, so that's definitely noted. So can we move to Trustee McElroy and then Pearson?
I met with the principal of Newport L 2 weeks ago, and she said to me, can we please ban these electric bikes from these babies on them? These are electric vehicles that they're riding to school, and can we do this? And I said, I think that's an excellent idea. There's no reason a 7-year-old should be on an electric vehicle going to school. And at Newport L, if you know the speed on the boardwalk is 8 miles per hour, and the average speed that these kids are going is 20 to 30. And they're all racing to get to school. And my suggestion would be, as a board, to immediately make a policy that K through 6th grade, because they can get to school from their parents and they can ride a normal bike, should ban all e-bikes from school. The next thing I think we should do, not as far as every school, but ban e-bikes from all schools, but parents have the ability to opt in and let their child, as long as they take full responsibility for their child, meaning an accident, that the school is out of it. We are not responsible for what could happen to their child. And in addition, any infraction that an older student gets on an e-bike, that the parents need to attend a traffic school with their child, that means the parents then will take this seriously, and instead of paying the fine and just go, okay, go away, or take the bike away for a period of time, and in addition, the police report, this is just going to and from school. I consider it a school incident that if a child gets an infraction on their electric bike, the school is notified, and they are also penalized at school in some type of detention or something. I mean, we have to take like a drastic action. I live on a street, a super steep street, every single day. They're doing wheelies out of control up and down my street. I watched 4 kids crash into our trash cans like 2 weeks ago. It's not reported. It's insane. So K through 6 ban, total ban, not allowed. 7 and up ban, but parents can opt in, because I know there's people coming from Costa Mesa going to, Newport schools, vice versa, and they need it. But they have to take full responsibility for the child, and it doesn't fall on the school.
Great. So clarifying question, I understood from Ms. Coley that when we spoke at a Costa Mesa meeting with Trustee Wygand, aren't we already banning K through 6? So that's already?
We have handbook language that's actually included in your packet, and so there's certain e-bikes and certain bikes that are not allowed on an elementary school campus, yes.
So
But not all.
Is it class 2 and 3 or
It's
just class
the
3?
class, I believe it's the class 3 one.
But it's not all.
Only
Certain ones, and those other ones you can, all of them need to be banned.
You can modify these other.
Yeah, they can modify the other ones. And
Thank
there's,
you. I don't think mine's not.
Okay, so, yeah.
So can you clarify for us what's the current?
So if we go to tab 2 in your, I think it's orange? Yes. I don't have tab here. So when we go to
I don't think,
right before the yellow.
and I would even say,
Okay.
not just e-bikes, but also the electric scooters, anything electric.
For elementary schools, so class 3 e-bikes and any other motorized vehicles are prohibited from campus by elementary and middle school students. Any students with a class 3 e-bike would have the e-bike confiscated and parents picked up or requested. So we included motorized because we were talking about scooters as well.
Yeah,
So we wanted to have both.
yeah, but it doesn't
So if you go to
include,
tab 2, it's the last page before tab 3.
wait, but does it include all bikes?
What, for the people who are watching,
I'm sorry.
so if they're going to look for this and it's in our policy, and I don't see them.
This is in the handbook.
So hold on one second, so I can understand.
Student handbook, what is the number, what is the section?
No problem, hold on one second, because I'm trying to I want to make sure that everybody's hearing the question.
and everyone's having a chance.
And everybody's I just want to make sure we're answering the right
Everyone to have a
question.
chance.
I know, we should have gotten this in advance, and I just want to make it clear to anyone that's watching.
This is just a discussion.
Okay,
So can you
so
please
we
tell
can
us?
clarify for a second, in your tab 2, you have the original ARs and board policy. That's a policy the board sets. We also have student handbooks that are best practices, the best practical application of board policy and how that's enacted at a school site. That's what you have here that she's referring to. And those live in both the elementary handbook, and then we have a secondary handbook. So we have the ones for the littles and then our older students. So I'm sorry, Trustee Anderson, I couldn't hear or understand your question.
No, I just
or
wanted
comment.
her to share what because she just started reading, so I
Okay.
wanted to make sure it was clear
Thank
what
you.
she was reading. I didn't know she was reading policy and handbook, what it was, so if
Thank
I don't know, no one in the community knows that might be listening, thank you.
Okay, so then, sorry, just to clarify, so then in the handbook, it does indeed say class 3 e-bikes and any other motorized vehicle is prohibited.
Correct.
So our handbook says they're prohibited, but you're saying we don't have a policy that prohibits it.
So
Because this clearly says it's prohibited, all of them.
Right.
It says all.
It's
All.
class 3 all, I'm sorry, I'm
Class
unfamiliar with my classes.
But it says and
Class three is
any,
like 30 and above, like.
Oh, 30 above.
but it says and any other motorized vehicle.
I think they meant the like alternative to an e-bike.
Yeah, I think you'd have to
But
spell
it's
out.
in the handbook, but we don't have a policy that says this sentence.
Correct, and let's be,
Correct.
okay, and to be clear about class 3 and other motorized vehicles, class 3 is a certain level of bike that goes a certain miles per hour.
But they
And then there are other motorized vehicles, golf carts, scooters, other things.
But isn't it the other e-bikes?
So those are motorcycles and other e-bikes, so we can be more clear. And I think that's where we're at in 2025. To Trustee Anderson's point, like we've been talking about this for a long time in the district, 2019 pre-COVID, somebody mentioned that. Where bikes have gone from 2019 to 2026, they've changed dramatically. So those those motorized vehicles and e-bikes have changed. So I think what we could do better, I would suggest, is that we could outline that in policy and handbook.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so are folks okay with that clarification, that in the policy, it reflects what the handbook actually says and broadens it to the electric?
That's my concern, is how is the handbook different than a policy?
Yeah,
like,
so let's
how
clean it up.
we have-
That's why we're here. That's
Yeah.
literally why we're
So
here.
like, that's my question
Yes,
to the district, is how do we have a handbook that doesn't follow our policies?
I think,
That's concerning to me.
but I do think that, as Dr. Torres said, it's because the e-bike, evolution of the e-bike has been very quick. Our policy has not caught up with our reality, which is the handbook. So now we go backward. This is why we have this meeting. We go backwards and we clean up the policies to reflect the tightening of that. Yes.
I didn't read this, but just to clarify for me. So when we wrote it, it was meant for, when you said and other electric vehicles, it wasn't, or electric things, it wasn't really meant for the other type of e-bikes, correct?
Others.
So now we need to make it for the children, K through 6, all
1, 2,
e-bikes.
and 3.
Yeah,
Whatever.
any e-bike, and then also any scooter or whatever electric vehicle they could be driving. Can we, that to me would be a very smart move.
So then that sounds like something that the
Right.
policy committee can then kind of take up and clarify. So if it's okay with all of you, we have 20 minutes left. Can we all agree today that the policy committee takes up these 2 particular policies that are in the policies, not the handbook. Using the handbook as a guide, but going beyond probably perhaps, but that's up to the policy committee to draft. But go through and say, okay, our deep concern is the e-bike safety, especially the K through 6. Can we restrict those and like on the scooters too? And then however you all feel about middle school, do you want to expand it through middle school? To just get a draft going, whatever
Yeah,
that is?
we'll work on
And
it.
then what are the repercussions, though? I think to your point, we don't want to lose the repercussions for when whoever is left with e-bikes, let's say it's high schoolers, when a high schooler does get in a violation, what are the steps? That the parent needs to do X, that this needs to happen. So those are all elements that you'll go back in the policy committee, you'll take out, Carrie will present, Dr. Torres will present you these 2 documents, you'll add to them, and you'll add these specific characteristics and qualifications of, okay, what's gonna happen then and then they can have administrative regulations that she'll then make that goes along with those, and those are the kind of things that will get sent back to handbooks for clarification.
We'd
And I
like your,
do-
we'd like your
right.
feedback.
And I want
Give us your feedback or email us feedback type
Well,
thing.
and I do know that the police have to also be involved, because when I talked to the police, with the head of police, that he said, we can't implement them going to traffic school.
Yeah.
That's something they have to do.
Oh, yeah, we can only control what we can control. So
we
our
can
policy
control,
that you guys will
but they-
write, you will write only what we can do. Like
Yeah.
your
But they want to work with
principals,
us,
stuff like
they
that.
said, they
Totally,
agree with us.
they can do that, but this is about what we can control, and I think we'll go to Trustee Pearson next, but did you have a clarification?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're clear. The administrative regulations are not policies.
Right.
So just so we're clear, what they showed you up there, we've referred to them as policies before, they are not. And absent a board policy, we have administrative regulation and other documents that allow us to conduct the visits of the school district, absent that policy. However, anytime a board wants to have a policy, that supersedes and then defines the rest of those things.
Yes. So then that policy committee will clarify all of this so that then any other documents in the district reflect what the actual, our law about bikes will be.
So if people are okay with that, did you want to?
I was just going to comment on Dr. Smith's comment about the accompanying board policies, and we can take a look at those and do a deep dive with the policy committee to see if there's an opportunity in those to add bike safety language.
Yeah, perfect. And then Trustee Pearson?
Yeah, I mean, I feel very thankful for this meeting, and I feel comfortable talking about it. I don't feel like we're doing this behind our parents' backs, because I feel like our job is to get out in the community and find out how they feel. I feel like I've had so many conversations at every one of my schools, not just the schools, but it was in one given day that I was at 3 different city meetings, one Corona Del Mar meeting, one CDM walk meeting. I was at 3 different city meetings with the police chief, and the only question anybody wanted to ask was about e-bikes. I mean, the poor guy didn't want to talk, the chief didn't really want to talk about e-bikes, but that was what, and that's all that they had to do. So when I'm hearing from my parents, because when this first came up, I think Chris did mention, I want to ban, my first concept was there's no way, how can we do this? But once I got out there and started asking the questions, it's something our parents want, something our community wants. So I feel very comfortable making that recommendation. Even this morning, I was, how far to go. K through 6, absolutely. Those students should not have these big machines on our campuses and having us be responsible for it. How do I go, the higher grades, 7 through 12, how do I feel? I think it's really hard to police, when, consequences and all this other stuff. Can we say a ban? Again, it's hard to police class 2. I know a lot of cities are doing, not a lot, but a few cities have gone, banned everything. Class 2 and class 3, they can only do class 1. How do we control that? I think that's going to be a nightmare. Is it better to do, okay, fine, let's ban them, but we have to give the parents the choice, because we have a lot of parents who, that's how the kids get to school. That's their prerogative. We are parent right. I'm a parent right person. Do we give them the right to opt in? Yet now it's their responsibility to take the safety issue for their child. I mean, to me, that's the simplest way to do it. To have that ban, but still give that parent that right to opt in for their student. But that becomes their responsibility. And I think that's just the cleanest way to do it, but then again, so, and I'm gonna get who's talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right, it is a huge, parents will stop me all the time, like I'll get texts, do you think we're ever gonna?
I know, yeah.
It's like, that's really, yeah.
No, and I do think, so to follow up on Trustee Pearson's point, I think the K through 6 is kind of a no-brainer for all of us, it sounds like. The 7 and 8 middle school, that one honestly is a no-brainer for me. I think their frontal lobe is not developed. It's just, what makes a 7th grader any more conscientious than a 6th grader? Honestly, I don't think there's anything. Sorry, 7th graders. But I do believe that for the high school, yes, the high schoolers, their parents need them to get themselves to where they are going, and then they can take on that accountability and those trainings and those, whatever the repercussions are. But I do think that the reason I am more gung-ho about us making the ban through the middle school and just have as little as possible bikes going to a school is I think it just will make it easier, honestly, on the police, because frankly, right now, what I've seen from Newport Beach Police, because I drive to CDM every day, and I was on East Bluff waiting to make a left turn. 2 cops on the motorcycles. A gang of 9 bikes went by. 3 of the girls did not have helmets on, which I know is not legal. You need to have a helmet. And both of the cops just sat there and hung out. I was like, can one of you go check on them? But again, they were all headed to CDM parking lot. They weren't going to flee. It wasn't going to be a car chase through the streets of Newport Beach. They were going around the corner to the school. And that would have been a great opportunity to pull them over, give them the tickets for not wearing the helmet, shame them in front of another 100 students that would have seen, I got to wear my helmet. But no, total missed opportunity. So if we don't limit the bike movement to our schools, I don't trust that they are penalizing when they see them out in the streets.
They're very heavy at our school penalizing, but they shouldn't have to be doing this.
Well, exactly. If we can save the work of them for having to do the middle school, why not? Yes.
So what I'm hearing, I'm on the policy committee, so what I'm hearing is kind of unanimous approval of from the trustees of like a K6, K6 and then with 7-8 discussion.
No, that's not, we
All right.
haven't, no.
This is
But it
targeted
gets to draft.
feedback.
To draft.
Because we're gonna get in committee and try to sort of start formulating. But what's even as important is the fact that we need to be partners in this, not the only driver in this. And that's something that's been huge for me from the beginning when I first sat on that dais back in 20 whatever. It's all the agencies that are involved, including the police and the city council and the public works department and even the businesses who are giving those bikes to those parents. Where, like Pedigo, for example, they have this that they give, but do they actually give it any sort of highlight? We need to bring all together. That's why I do think a session is good to bring everyone together, but just so you know, it's not all on us. It can't be, but we will do whatever we can to make it easier on parents to say no. Okay, fine, we did it with our cell phone policy, it's working beautifully. Okay, we're giving teeth to, and safety's always been our driver. I mean, we all know, we care so much about our students and our families and our teachers, and so we're gonna get it done. It's just to what degree, but we also have to have partners, and I think it's gonna be the job of our staff to reach out to the agencies that are involved.
And Trustee Henderson, you have your hand.
That's it.
So my request about having the study session is because, again, so some of this is new data to us, which we didn't get in advance. I am someone who appreciates data and also best practices. I know there's a high need to do something on this, but I want to hear from people, so from the city of Costa Mesa specifically, who are experts in this field and know what's happening in other cities, in other jurisdictions, and other school districts. So while I understand that the 4 Newport trustees have a decision and have decided and have these conversations, in Costa Mesa, that has not happened. So when we have students, particularly for middle school, who are traveling long distances, to me, I think there's a lot more that we need to do proactively rather than punitively. We as the district, I think, have a responsibility, particularly when we are also in charge of transportation routes, transportation distances. It's a larger conversation, which to me is what a study session should be about. Rather than, we know this is important, we know this is literally life and death, but rather than making knee-jerk decisions that we're going to make a policy about X, Y, and Z, to me, it needs to be informed and it needs to include community partners and parents and students. So that was to me the goal for this meeting. And again, as I told Kara, before Christmas, because we know that people are getting e-bikes. So, that's one piece to it. But I think, again, it's important that things are not in silos. It's important that there's a process, and then it makes sense that we're not just, well, we heard a policy from over here and we want this to stop tomorrow. Yes, and we need data and we need proactive pieces rather than just one thing.
I will say that.
Sorry, go ahead. No, and I hear you, but try to hear this. I think our jobs as trustees, being voted in by our constituents, is to get out and hear what they have to say. I mean, especially, and you keep saying Costa Mesa, it's really hard to get them out, like they need night things, and more the reason for you to get out, more the reason for you, that's our job. Our job is to give the district what our constituents are saying, what the pulse of our community is, not just to put more work on them. I mean, I have seen this data. She gave it to us at another meeting. Carrie gave this to it at another meeting, and so our job, that's our job. I mean, they do the how, we give them what our constituents are saying, and that's what so we haven't talked, the 4 of us haven't talked, but we've talked to our constituents. Mm-hmm. We've talked to the principals, we've talked to our we've talked, I mean, I was at a performance today, and I literally was like, what do you think about, bikes?
Me too.
They didn't have any idea who I was. And I was just, so that's kind of,
and then, yeah,
That's not what I'm saying, though. That's where I think that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying not hearing from constituents. I'm saying, based on data, what are the cities saying? Do we need to focus on certain streets? Do we need to focus on certain schools? Does it need to be a middle school because that's where we're getting a lot of tickets? To me, it's about not just hearing from constituents, that's not what I'm saying the study session is about. It's from hearing from experts in both cities on what the data is and what are best practices on a ban. Does it look like it's more important that we work together with both city partners and the parents and the police department and the school districts maybe you have to have all three sign off that that student has done training? There's just practical pieces. If we're doing a policy, then I don't think we're there yet. Which is what I wanted this meeting to be and why I'm asking for a next step meeting.
Yes, and there will be a next step meeting, and I know Dr. Torres is working on that. And also though, there is a lot of data that has been presented that shows, for instance, there's been 107 trainings at Estancia, 859 at Ensign. Like, we know that there are hundreds of e-bikes out on the streets and kids are getting hurt every day, and that we do have the power to limit their using them as a tool to and from home. We can't limit what they do on the weekends. We can't limit how they get ticketed by the police or when they get ticketed. We can only control, can you come to school on this vehicle, yes or no? That's the only leverage we have. And that is, I think, what the policy committee is thinking about, talking about, and bringing a draft to all of us to weigh in on. But Trustee White?
And I was gonna say, every time we've had the last 4 years trainings at Ensign with parents, with the police department, with everything, 3 parents show up. It's not we just need to, we need to create an action plan. The cities have the city of Costa Mesa has their, active transportation department. The city of Newport Beach just updated their municipal codes, and they are also telling the city of Costa Mesa they're working together on an updated whole municipal codes, which is going to include that removal of those bikes and have things where their parents have to come and actually pick up the bikes if they attach those. So there's so much going on that a study session is just, and then we have cabs. We have cabs for that. And then now the city of Newport Beach also has a bike safety group. And so that's already done. We just need to lead like we did on the cell phone policy, and just take action, because you know what? We all have the input from all the places that we need right now. We just need to I don't need to have Jimmy come over here and tell us even more. Like, this is, we know. We know what we need to do. We have a policy committee. What we'll do, we'll craft something, we'll bring it to the board, and if the board doesn't like it, we can redline it and change it. But that's the part of the policy committee, is that you make something up and then everyone votes on it. So that's my next steps, and I agree with Leah of where that next steps need to go.
And then,
I just have a quick question to help with policy. Like, what do you guys think about once they're 16 and they have a license?
We can do that too. Hey, you got a license, now you can do an e-bike.
Huh?
Yeah.
You're 16 in high school though, so to me, high school is different, but it's through the middle school when they are.
The middle school one, if you don't do anything with middle school, you're not doing
And I'm fine with that.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so then with that, then the next steps will be the policy committee will look through these, and again, Dr. Torres brings all the models from other districts and all of the best practices to the policy committee, and we'll have these ideas. Irvine's been pretty progressive on a lot of stuff. We already know that. We've already learned that at our Costa Mesa meetings. So there's a lot that can be done there, and then staff will work to figure out the next steps for public meetings, how that goes, how that study session looks, invited, if it's subcommittees on both cities, what is that going to take to get that?
I would just say, just point of clarification, if it's a study session, then it's board driven. So I'd work with you to see how you want to schedule it, who you want to invite. If it's a community meeting, then we would want some more information on the interests of the board. But certainly they're different meetings, and I think that's still unclear.
Then I guess that's the question.
I'm not for a board meeting study session. I think this is a great discussion. I would rather reach out to the community and have their input. And usually a board study session, we can't really interact so much with the public.
Well, then an info
Trustee
meeting,
Murphy,
like a
sorry, she hasn't had her hand up once. Can we have
or
Trustee Murphy go first?
an info meeting, people need to know what's
So-
happening.
So I think, Cynthia's recommending Saturday.
A Saturday, because that people can come. People can't come. It's not like they're helping their kids, well, hopefully they're helping their kids. Hopefully they're working, they're working, but a Saturday would be a better option, in my opinion.
And the only reason why I haven't said anything is because I'm just gearing up for my parent friends who are going to yell at me.
Yes, we are going to yell a lot
when this policy is implemented, so.
Kid doesn't lose their front teeth.
they'll be
Yes.
taking it.
They
No,
are.
I totally agree with you. I
Yeah.
said, I'm just gearing up for when the policy is passed.
This is my concern now with policy overall.
Oh, they're gonna be pissed.
They
but
want.
they're gonna be pissed, but I won't, I haven't given my
surprised.
kid an e-bike for these reasons.
But they can opt in
And
if they're in
he's
high
not.
school, they can opt in.
Exactly.
I want that. I mean,
That part, I'm not worried about high school. My middle schooler
Yes.
is
That's the
mad
problem.
because he can't get an e-bike, and
So-
I don't care because I like his teeth.
And also, I did the same to mine, so she's also,
And that's, so back to trustee Anderson's point
Yeah,
about
so-
whether it is a study session or a community meeting, as Cynthia mentioned on a weekend. So can we poll the board here who's wanting a study session versus who's wanting it to be a community meeting?
No, I'm changing I mean, that's fine if that we're gonna do that. We don't need to pull it. I just wanna make sure that we are having an info meeting then for the community specifically at large, not just for parents, about what the plans are, because a big piece of this is communication, right? People seem to still not know their child has to wear a helmet. Like, that's a basic. So, to me, and again, this is my concern with having a policy committee that does not represent currently. It currently represents Newport Harbor Zone and CDM Zone. It doesn't represent Costa Mesa Zone or Estancia Zone. That was a big part of my concern with what happened last night. So, no, that's what happened. So Costa Mesa Zone is not represented, or Estancia Zone is not represented on the policy committee. That's a problem for me when we're making decisions like this that are for the whole district. So I just want to, I want that out there because this is part of those conversations. When children are using e-bikes to get to school across very long distances, I want to make sure that the training is happening rather than just we're talking about banning things, because there are other features. There are other times where I think the city's been doing a great job in Costa Mesa of doing education, but I just think we need to make sure that we're working in concert with them, and I don't think that's been happening thus far at the level that it could. Thank you.
thank you, and I think to Trustee Wygan's point, there are so many moving pieces in the bike issue, and I think that's our staff, they're sort of accountable to keeping all the pieces connected and figuring out how it is best, because there are clearly from the slides a bunch of trainings happening. Is it sufficient? I don't know, but to kind of keep that ball rolling. But then to make sure that whatever, the policy committee is just a committee. It is just 3 people that are going to sit and craft something that we ultimately will say yay or nay. So I also was not excited to not be on the policy committee with my PhD in policy. I love it. It's fun for me. That's the one part of the job I like. But that's fine. I've gotten over it because in reality, they're going to have to bring it to us for a vote, and it's going to be fine. So I think we just need to kind of keep moving forward, and we need things to happen for the bikes very quickly, as soon as they can. So if there's policy, and then there's also the programs and planning and all of these other and partnerships, all of that, all the 4 Ps, they're all happening. But this group can handle the policies right now, and the planning and the partnerships and all of that is going to still keep going. It's still running. It's still happening, to make sure that those other elements, and we understand we don't want it all to be punitive, but right now there's no punitive and it's not working. And our kids are getting hit on bikes and falling and hitting pedestrians. I saw this older lady walking her dog, these 2 kids zoomed right by her. She almost fell over. It was it's a menace, and if we have any ounce of control over it, we can control them coming to and from school. That's all we can handle. The rest is other people's in control. But this is the only little piece of the puzzle in our control, like the Venn diagram. What can you actually control? What do you want to control? We can do this. And so that is where we can begin.
And the only thing I would say is the idea of letting parents opt in if they have to is a good idea.
But for middle school as well.
Yes, and that's, no one is arguing with that. No one has been asked, no one's arguing that.
Yes, there's 5 people that are arguing.
No, they're not arguing, they're not arguing opt-in.
I heard that.
It was our idea. It was my idea. They're not arguing opt-in. They're not. We can't.
I heard that.
Okay, but that's not what's happening.
That not happened? You said that, you said that you.
No,
I'm the one that said they can opt in.
They can
That was part of my.
For high school, not for middle school.
No, we're not doing a ban on high school. The ban is, ban is middle and down.
Yes,
With
that's my
opt-in.
concern.
No, and if the second
With
grader
an
wants to
opt-in.
opt in, the second grader can, if that parent wants to
The
opt in,
ban is
the only one, go right ahead.
and sign that they're gonna take
That's not what I heard. I
Okay,
heard
but
a
that's-
whole ban for K to
Figure
6
that out when it's
and
a
a ban
policy
for middle school as well. Well, that's why we're having the
Yeah,
conversation.
But, and I hear you on that, but we did not say high school. We said that, I think opt-in is the best idea, because if there's a parent who's like, I can't get from A to Z, and I'm gonna take full responsibility, if my kid crashes and loses their teeth or dies, I mean, that's
But I think there's legal
life.
issues
I
with
mean,
that we can't commit to.
well,
So-
true that.
I don't know
So
about that.
Literally
We'll have to
talking
figure that
about
out.
not having
True
a
that.
full middle school ban without more information from city partners.
Well, yeah,
Our
they
streets,
I mean,
they should be getting those tickets, right? We can do one piece, yes, but it's not our job, the whole process of them getting to school. That's why it needs to be a joint conversation to me.
That's what we're here for.
Well, that's what I want it today to be. So I want it today,
But if we
like,
didn't argue, we would have had more time to do, I mean, that's what we're discussing, that's what
I
we're
want it
discussing.
to make a poll.
But today is
so
just-
we can
today
have
is what we
police that we're committing from both cities, for the city staff to be part of this conversation, and then parents wanted to be there as well. So I'm just sharing, again, what I would have wanted this conversation to be today, before a policy is decided, without having those components.
And I think that is clear, but I understand what you wanted to happen today, but today was about what the board can discuss among ourselves and what we can control, while the other moving parts of these other committees that are happening, these other meetings with police are happening, those other things are gonna keep happening, and those things will evolve, but what today was just for us here to figure out where we all stand and what directive we can give that policy committee so that they can kind of start drafting and bring things to us. And then at the night of whenever we do get that draft from them, we can decide, okay, do we want to vote or not? But then that's what happens that night. But for today was just, where are we, what are some options? And I think it's clear now that we understand what are the options, a community-wide info meeting on bikes on a weekend, that sounds great. But another special session like this doesn't really necessitate at this moment. But I think there are still other things that are going to keep happening. We're going to keep talking to the city, the other cities, learning all the best practices. So I think it's definitely moving forward. And I think with that, if there's no more questions, comments, we can adjourn unless there's any final.
I just want to make sure that's happening, because some of us have been talking about this for over a year. This presentation has been changed even from last night because it was missing key pieces from the city of Costa Mesa. So my concern is our staff has not been doing as much. So I want to make sure that going forward we do have that commitment, because that has not been the commitment in the past. And when we have deaths, it's really concerning to me. It's not something that we can just choose not to have those conversations and partnerships with both cities and the police departments and those teams working on that. To me, that's where I want to make sure the piece we can control, which is the district side, our staff is doing all of these pieces. Our staff is having conversations about safe roads to school, and as part of OCTA. Our staff has compiled this before we're having a meeting. These are trainings that were happening with the city, and the district was not a huge piece of them. So when we're claiming that we're doing these trainings, that's not necessarily been the case. So I sat on 12.
I went to all of them.
Yeah, and I hear your concerns, and I think at this point, we are good to kind of move forward. If you have one quick final comment.
I just want to thank the staff for all your hard work and everything you do. It's a lot of work, and to me, if you did it the night before, who cares? You guys are doing a great job, and I really appreciate everything you guys do for us.
All right, well, with that positive note, 3:06, we're adjourned, and thank you everyone for your time.